now okay. So, yes, hello everybody. Now, before we really get started, I want to go back here. Let's see. Make sure everything is looking good. Oh, and I wanted to say, let me see. Let me alt tab through some of this stuff. I wanted to say hello, Crispin, who was first, Arno Boris, who was second, Kronos, who was third, and Singh, who was fourth. Thank you all for showing up early and well before I did, I believe, most of them. And saying hi. Okay, I loaded this in a few moments ago, and it's been like 10 minutes or more. And it looked corrupted, so I want to try loading it one more time. Yes, Arno, finally I showed up. I'm trying to solve a few problems here. Well, no, this time it worked. Okay, well, I don't know why. I don't know why it didn't work. It cost about 20 minutes of this being late. It has been, I don't know what the problem was, whether it was with Hearts of Iron or my computer or my mod. Oh boy. Okay, everyone. Sorry for being late. Most of the lateness was just purely my fault. Needed the extra sleep. Needed the extra sleep. Okay, these guys are coming to here. So let's tell you to keep going to here. And you keep going to here. Because I see the tanks and the infantry moving that way. So let's create a blocking force there. Okay, that looks like good, and we're getting reinforcements, and they're up there, and that looks all right. These guys are trying to cross the river there. You can move up to there. Oh, Cronus, thank you for being one of the early people. Yes, my manpower is low. That is very true. We'll examine that in a moment. That's going to become something very critical. Thank you for pointing that out. I'm not doing everything the best I can here. All right, let's move these guys here. Let's move this division and let's move 2 divisions against them. Hey, Felipe, good to have you here. I do respect your guys' time, and I am sorry for being late. It just, when my alarm went off, I woke up, I got up, I just did not feel that well from lack of sleep. So I just thought, I better lay down, see how much sleep I actually get. I didn't even reset my alarm clock. And just so that when I did actually get up to stay up for a while, I would actually feel like trying to put on a good show for you guys. And I do look at it that way. Okay, now. I've got general mobilization. Done. Which should be giving a fairly large army, in my opinion. $19 to $30. We could go to here, but we don't have the political power. Again, we need more. If you give me all these, if you give all these national policies, instead of 4 or 6 national policies to change, you give me a bunch of them, and you still require me to use big amounts of political power, and you're not doing something to pour political power in, behind it to make it happen. I mean, you got to balance things out that way. And we're still trying to get war economy going here, which I want to look, does this affect recruitable population? No, it doesn't seem to. I'm not saying it should. I'm just wondering if it did. Most industries nationalized, foreign investment regulated. Of course, we looked at that. General mobilization, high standards. Is that now? I'm just trying to look here at what might be affecting. No recruits. We could do foreign recruits, which, if we had the manpower for foreign volunteers, foreign recruitment encouraged, foreign conscription. Okay. Again, if we had the manpower. Here is the. Okay, here is a problem here with all of this. Recruitable population factor plus 10% for a 3-year draft. Extended draft, extensive draft. There used to be a one that was called service by requirements, which meant that you were drafted with the idea until the end of the war. Yes, and I will look at the national focus in a minute. Let me see here. But expanded draft, somewhere between expanded draft and extensive draft, scraping the barrel maybe late in the war. But, I got 37 effing political power, and I'm probably going to right now, because I'm seeing that we only got 12,000 people here. I'm probably going to just grant myself some political power here. I know that's, I'm doing air quotes, cheating. Well, fucking A. If you give me, again, a lot of things need political power to do, including things like national, or decisions and all of that. You give me that, and then, and you don't give me enough flexibility. I don't think I've been spending political power like a drunken sailor or something on frivolous notions or ideas. So we're taking over Skoda. Now, auxiliary force, 28 days. Let's see if I press this. I get it. Okay. Well, I get this event. Now, is this event going to, well, probably just immediately pop up. I don't know. Can't you spell out people when you make a mod? Unless this is supposed. See, this is. I know I just woke up. I know I'm cranky. Hey, folk, how you doing? Hey, and Plastic Gangster. So I know I'm cranky and all, so please, everybody. Okay, I'm going to start making an episode here. So I'm going to maybe rant a little bit about this. I am already ranting. Hello, fellow armchair generals. Of course, this is Gamer1745, and I've already sort of been starting the stream and starting to rant, so I decided I was going to start making an episode here. And hello, people who make black ice. I think you're doing great. I really appreciate all your free work. You're not getting paid for this. I know this is a huge mega project and you can't get everything done right at the start. You're not a big company who's, needing to launch everything completely successfully here. But the complaint of the moment, and there's a bunch of complaints going on right now, but the complaint of the moment is, well, okay, first complaint is, see, this is how it's sort of a tan color, we'll call this, and that means it's completed. And this is green, and it needs to be completed. If I come over here, green means it's completed, tan means it's uncompleted. Fucking get your colors straight. And I really do appreciate you not updating and changing the standard version. And maybe this has already been updated in your, I know I'm not reading the chat. I'll get to the chat in a moment. In your, rolling out testing versions. And I really do appreciate that I'm able to play a consistent version without having an update every other week. So maybe this has been changed. But please, right now, whatever project you're working on, everybody stop it and fix this color issue between national focuses and research or any other thing, so that it is consistent. The consistent color for has been researched and or whatever researched or completed or whatever you want to call it, and not completed. Please get that straight so I'm not confusing myself. I know I'm an old man. Sing, I was late too. And hello, Stuart. How you doing? Yes, we have people on both Twitch and YouTube, and I'm seeing all that chat, and I try also pay attention over on Rumble, and which we have some people watching now. 4 it says currently, and probably no one over on Kick. So okay. I was told, and I know you can change things. You don't have to do what the base game did, but I was told one of the big purposes for national focus, which I think you sort of use it for too, is a roadmap. So if players want to get to here, they know they need to go down this roadmap, as opposed to just being, well, I wanted to do this. I didn't realize I needed to, years before do some particular decision or event to make it happen. Okay, that's fine. Not everyone knows history. Not everyone wants to find out after playing for 40 or 50 hours, really, damn it, I got to start over again because I, got to learn that I need to, do something early on to get to something later. I get that. That's fine. The other, with that roadmap of what to do, the other, was, to tell them the effects. So what is the effect of Hitler Youth Auxiliary Force? Oh, get you an event. Now, to the best of my knowledge at this point, there's no ability to know what this event is. Can't you put in the description an idea of increases manpower, or or 20% increase to manpower, or what, some clue? I mean, I don't know. Does this affect national unity? Does this affect, because what is Hitler Youth Auxiliary Force? Now, I know of no term that is specifically that. It isn't like the National Socialist craft carts. Now there may be something that translates auxiliary in force into German, and in Hitlerjugend something in German that maybe I've heard before and know. Now I know they had flak helpers, in which Hitler Youth was helping with the flak cannons and passing ammunition and helping with that. And I know very late in the war that they started to train up the werewolves, which were setting up to be guerrilla Hitler Youth type forces, to resist occupation of German territories. So I have no idea what this is supposed to represent. Is this, the SA, particularly early on, but as the war's going on, is being drafted in the army or doing other things. I do believe the Hitler Youth was running around and doing the winter help funds, the winter hilfs, collecting money from people, going around with little cans and shaking them and getting people to put coins in it, that kind of thing. So I don't know what this is supposed to represent. And right now, the problem here is manpower. Now, the other thing, and again, guys, I love what you're doing here. I'm bitching and moaning. I'm sort of in a grumpy mood at the moment. I hope it's entertaining to those watching. And so, yes, this is criticisms of your work, but it's coming from a place of love. I'm loving what you're doing. Just got to solve some of these issues. Okay, and I'm on 2-year draft, and I'm already in 1941. Why am I on 2-year draft in 1941? Because I don't have a fucking enough political power. You go from however many there is sort of originally with national policies, so long since I played the base game, and you've created all these national policies, and they all seem to have similar amounts of political power needed to change things. Or I go over here, military mobilization, general mobilization. Okay, that seems like I'm more or less at the top of that. That's good. So, and then draft age. Well, 18 to 35, that seems okay. Get another 5%, but again, 75% political power. Is this really meant to hamstring me to keep me from doing things? I really don't think that I have been spending political power unwisely. Okay, this is the original Hitler Youth. See, here's that other Hitler Youth effect here. I'm noticing it here. And so this one, base political power gain, 3%, good. Base stability plus 3%. We have a stability issues here. And daily fascism support. Okay. But see, I don't know if the next Hitler Youth thing is just going to increase that, or another effect. Maybe it removes this effect and does another effect on top of it. That's just this, but on steroids a little bit more. Or is it going to give me, because one of the people in chat believes that the thing is going to give me greater recruitable population. And okay, the Volksdeutsch here, we've already have. And the other thing here is foreign recruitment, 2%. Subject manpower requirements. Okay, foreign recruitment encouraged. Okay, but again, I don't have the political power to do this. You've got to, whether like I did say, I have not been able to hold my parade in Paris. Now, this is command power here. At least one unit in Paris. Oh, well, maybe I don't have that in there. But I look at this, and yes, I'll get some political power out of it. But still, it should jump me up in stability and much more. So okay, let me find a military unit somewhere around here, and we'll eventually hold a parade. I guess we'll hold a parade. Okay, that's probably enough bitching for the moment. Black Ice Dev Team. I do hope you watch at least the beginning of this. This frustration does come from love. So, and I know you could, because I've made my mods to pass. So I'm not saying I'm better than you, by God, no. What I'm saying is I know where you're coming from, and that you're doing what you can when you can. When people have time or interest in a particular topic, subject, you get people to do what you can, and I get it. But something like the colors for research, or something like the other thing is, I know I said I was getting down, these take way too many days, and you've added so many wonderful ones. This isn't a complaint, but I don't think I've done anything radically wrong in my decision picking, but there are a lot of ones that happened along with what I think more or less my decision picking is. I think the Nibelungen tank factory's already happened by now, and I'm just doing this now, and I just did that before. That these things should have happened earlier. So either, reduce the number of days, because this is a days issue. Just maybe start out by cutting all these in half. Now, I haven't looked at the other national focus trees, whether they've also, I'm sure some of them have expanded like this, and if they've expanded greatly, cut the number of days in half. Now, if you're worried that people are just going to race through your national focus tree, do things that are meant, to be done in 1944, doing them in 1940, we'll just put, after such and such date, or after owning Moscow for a while, whatever the hell it is. So, okay, we'll get off the main rant here. Yes, I do want to. I'm going to now read the chat that I've been sort of ignoring here, and I don't ever mean to ignore you completely, guys. Just I sometimes get focused on some things. So yes, let me scroll back up here. Okay. Wow, there's been a lot of chat going on. Hitler is a political manpower focus. Thanks, Kronos. I do believe you. I'm just saying I wish I could see it. Yes, Gamer Rise of the Giants. Yeah, it wasn't so much this morning. Okay. Also, in industry research below civil workshops, one gives tech recruitable population. You could research medicine. Yeah, exactly. That's another thing that again, it's another sort of complaint, is that they have added a lot of really cool, okay, that's, wound division recovery rate, that does help, but 41 here, antibiotics, okay, monthly population, plus 5%, that's absolutely good. That they've increased so much of these things that, and I have done, sort of minimum here. I done a decent amount here, but I've done basically, or nearly, I know there is one like exclusive naval thing, but I've not done much naval, so, and there's weapons. So I don't think it just seems that this is blossoming without corresponding, and Germany was doing a lot. So we'll catch up on that. So, okay, catching up, yes. So we can do some, and there is some civil workshops there as well. You can always do a parade in Berlin for more political power. Thanks, Frog Eyes. Yes, we're getting there. Ukraine is trying to call Wagner Group to fight versus Russia, killing those is bad. Yes, the will. Yeah. Oh man. I believe Prigozhin and the lieutenant and one of the other guys were on the airplane, but again, I don't know if we have that properly confirmed. I did report that it's reported that that happened, but I'm not absolutely sure. Okay, got to be honest, this game looks great sometimes. Yes, this game, I mean, they're really... The Black Ice team particular, not so much the dev team, is really trying to make a historical, the Paradox dev team, historical game, and they finally did these railroads, which really make a difference. They finally have supply centers. Now, still don't have supplies as a thing that is produced in factories and moved to the front. I know it's sort of nebulous because it's a combination mix of food, which really isn't modeled in the game other than, and has never really been modeled in the game other than being cut off from it. But ammunition was modeled in the previous version of the game, which was used, just producing quote unquote supply. But in many ways, not in all ways, but in many ways, it is much better than Hearts of Iron 3. In other ways, it's not nearly as good. So calling up older reservists is the cheapest option for manpower. Yes, folk, we'll get there in just a moment. Brackets give you manpower too. Okay. It looks so deep in all the portraits, mostly accurate. Must make you a favorite general, and it looks very immersive. Yes. The one thing that, I mean, they went from wanting to have just this, the sort of field marshal generals, to now allowing sub-generals, and now on a division, you now have this guy. This is random set of names with a generic focus. Now you can if you get enough political or command power, but that's another issue. Promote this guy up, and he can earn traits by fighting in various trains and conditions, is what my understanding. And this is sort of kind of meant to I don't know if I'm trying to see if it will give me anything more. My understanding is, I guess I should say, is this is sort of kind of meant to get sort of traits that you earn from fighting. So I wish you could come in here and click on it and personalize the name, and I wish you could come in here and pick an image so that it is not... I want to click on another one of these here. And yeah, you can see a different image here. So you can see the two images. So that if somebody wanted to add a bunch of images, I don't know why you couldn't, and I don't know why you couldn't tie the name to the image, just like in the old Hearts of Iron 3 setup. So, and it could just be randomly picked. And yes, I can come up with a flow chart that I'm sure that some of the talented programmers could program in that would have a comparison to having some of the old traits. Oh, hey, he's a tank officer. Oh, is this a tank division? Well, yes, then match them up. No, then don't. I mean, simple little flow chart kind of programming that could be done to solve it, so that 90% of the time for us, detailed players, we don't need to change this unless we're that's why I say 90%. That's where the 10% who wants to have the 250th Infantry Division commanded by the historical guy at the historical date. If you're and yes, I'm going to say freak, because that's very few people would want to do that. Cool if that's your jam. Now, some sort of famous divisions, Rommel and the 7th Panzer Division early on, yeah, okay, I sort of, especially with Hearts of Iron 3, did things like that because those are in my mind, and I just know them. And so in some of the famous few SS divisions and whatnot. So a few places I would have the historical least person there for a little while. But mostly it could just be various random things. And so you don't have to have the complaint of, I don't want to futz around with, each division general. I just want to play more casually. Well, fine, and that's actually, I sort of a detail that I don't want to put in a check every single infantry division general to make sure he's right. I just want to, pick out, a generic German infantry division guy and have it randomly do it there. And if I want to, I can, play around with it, but have it, or a random Panzer general or whatever, get stuck in there, or mountain general or whatever. So that's something I wish would be nice to go back and do again. Also, please open a window in Twitch. Okay, yes, thanks, Arno. If you are on YouTube, it would be great if you hit the thumbs up. You can watch me on anywhere. The one I am trying to, Balder von Strichen, okay, Plastic Gangster. So, that I normally, the one thing I do want to see more viewers on Twitch is for with War Thunder, but Hearts of Iron, wherever you want to be, it says, well, over on Rumble, it says there's 5 watching now. Hello, guys on Rumble. Yes, Trump is great. Biden sucks. I know there's a lot of political people over on Rumble. I mean, you don't have to agree with my politics. It's just, to be a welcome person here watching. But just saying hi to the political people. And 16 combo, it says, between Twitch and YouTube. I don't know how many that's double watches like Arno. So yeah, so you can watch it wherever. Historically, Hitler Youth was Manpower. Well, yeah. And historically, you also have women coming into the armed forces, not just the workforce. And this is, again, I had to correct. I don't know that Admiral Teague will ever watch this, but thank you for inviting me. We had a watch party. Currently, the way he sort of did it was currently the movie Patton is free on YouTube right now. If you want to go watch it after the stream, go ahead, watch it. It's a great movie. But we did a watch party, and some people were watching it sort of on their own, and others, he sort of had a feed of it up that you could watch it. And so we had it there, and we were 3 of us were sort of analyzing the movie as it was going along and talking about the history, and I contributed heavily to it, and thank you for inviting me on it. So there is that. If anybody's interested, it's still up over on his channel. But, I had to correct because he was under the impression that Germans kept the women out of the workforce. No, they were women, young women in National Socialist Germany were basically drafted. Unless you had kids, and that's probably almost need to be plural. Now, they were also drafting women in Britain during the war too, basically. And by drafting, I don't mean putting them into the army. And this is sort of the graphics here that they're being used here. That looks like the Women's Land Army in Britain. Sort of there was an official uniform, but a lot of them, because they're out being farm girls, wearing whatever sort of, functional clothing too. So some of it, and this, there's there's the BDM, which is the female version of the Hitler Youth. I mean, they're part of the Hitler Youth, but for girls. That was doing the thing. But then there was also the Women's RAD, Reich Arbeitsdienst, or the labor service. A lot of them were basically required to go into that eventually. Now, or do various war work, which, work in a factory. Women were mostly required to do something. If they got a job in a military factory, well, great. If they got a job, or if they were working with the Women's RAD, going sort of, out doing farm work and doing other sorts of things, great. If they were joining the what was it? The the women's helpers, my German's failing me right now, but women's helpers. So they would help with dealing again with the flak guns, or running, because telephone services were manual back then, meaning somebody has to unplug and plug in connections when you make phone calls. So basically every time you're making a phone call somewhere in Germany, you're having at least one person momentarily, and then when that phone call ends, the lights go on and come off or whatever. You're tying up a human person. Now the human person may be dealing with multiple phone calls kind of thing at once, but there is somebody having to deal with your phone call, and so you need all kinds of telecommunications going on, not just for the war, but hey, a factory ordering some parts from the factory down the block. It's that. So there's a lot of paperwork being done. For Germans love to have lots and lots of paperwork covering lots and lots of everything they're doing. So they need all these people. So women were forced to do lots of jobs that they had to do. So it's not just allowed. Now allowed would, and I don't know if I moved it here, if this is what it started as. I started as that, but allowed would be peacetime Germany. Encouraged would be early 1940, 1941. By 1943, it's sort of would be something comparable to this labor home front. So it changes over time for women, and yes, that would be something that would help here. Okay. Yes, I'm doing very fine, just grumpy sleep situations. Sing. Okay. Stuart. Okay, Stuart. You probably know who you... Oh, Plastic Gangster Stuart. Okay, that's good. Good to know, Plastic Gangster. Hard to keep track. The reserve is one of the manpower auxiliaries used for a bonus, yes. They were also helping a lot with stuff, patrolling, looking for down. Oh, yes. Yes, the Hitler Youth. Yeah, and the SA were doing that, and the Reich Arbeitsdienst would do that. All that kind of stuff is being called out. Also, post-bomb, going and looking for survivors, clearing out dead bodies, clearing roads, not so much repairing a lot of buildings, but just getting the rubble and getting what's still functioning as, bombing is happening. Oh yeah, there's lots of, whether it's Hitler Youth or whether it's the women's organizations, all of that stuff is all being used. So yes, in the general sense, in the war effort, absolutely Hitler Youth, and not so much the really young boys. And there's sort of another, I'm blanking on it, another sort of symbol for the really young Hitler Youth, but the sort of middle of the Hitler Youth, the sort of the middle age and the older boys, definitely were doing a lot of auxiliary war help. But for the Hitler Youth, as far as I can tell, again, and I've looked at it, but I don't know, like I like to say now, is I know a shit ton about World War II, but I know that there's so much more out there that I don't know than I do. So trust me, and I know some of you guys, whether it's a particular area or just some other stuff, stuff I don't know. So I'm, again, so I know I'm wrong on things too. But again, so far as I know, there is no sending Hitler Youth outside of Germany or outside of their sort of local area or region. You're meaning they're not like getting at least as a general situation, they're not getting a lot of Hitler Youth and sending them from Stuttgart to Munich or something like that. And they're definitely not sending them out to do help work or something in occupied France. Not on the Hitler Youth front, but on the SA front, which is something of a similar situation to a degree. They weren't, there are a few exceptions that I know of, but generally speaking, they weren't sending SA units to occupation duties in foreign territories, generally speaking. Now they did create, and I do know that they created an SA Abteilung for Warsaw. And the reason I know this is because somebody was selling documents from somebody who did that, who was a member of that. And they, in the details about it, and I saved this stuff, whether I ever want to make an event, it was from a young man who was definitely of military aged, and from the photo, and he was in the SA, he looked fit for military use. But he was originally a member of an SA unit somewhere, I think in Western Germany. And he was sent out to Warsaw to help oversee or be one of the manager staff, or however you want to say it, of one of the armaments factories that was going to continue to being operated. So he had he was much more valuable as a manager of making armaments than he was going to be a guy carrying a rifle at the front. So, and he was, youngish man. I would, late 20s, early 30s or something. I don't know, but probably more the 20s, I think. He probably had his age on the stuff. And I have that saved somewhere. But he was assigned to an SA unit that was formed here in Warsaw of people like him. So that, people who had a day job, Germans, who, were Nazi party members and wanting to be members of the SA. So that, in the SA, they're, as a percentage, especially by the late 1930s, because early on they do have a lot of sort of full-time SA people. As a percentage of the members of the SA, it is a very small percentage that it's like their full-time paid gig. And they're definitely administrators and other people. Most of the SA members aren't necessarily, there were reserve, they called them that type term, SA units. But most of the SA duties are part-time type duties that flare up, need to be done, whether it's a big party rally or party whatever, but they have day jobs. They work in a factory, they work on a farm, they work in a shop. Most of that, because later on, as the Nazis are in control, the economy's doing good enough that all these men are employed, and so they get an employee, so the party doesn't have to give them a full-time extra job. Now, some of them, even as a part-time situation, do get a few extra Reichsmarks from working in the SA as a part-time gig. So without necessarily even attaching the term reserve, most of these guys aren't like sitting around all day in their SA uniforms waiting for something to do, or standing around guarding a factory in an SA uniform, that kind of thing. So there were a few SA units that were distinctly outside of official Germany, but these were done in a similar sort of creation fashion of youthful people being sent out there. Okay, let's continue to get through the chat. Here, look at the right policy on the draft. Okay, you can always, we're going to the military parade here. No plan, world, nothing, which really, okay. Okay, it stacks, yes. Thanks. I have a plan. Okay, hold the parade, and upgrade the brackets should solve it for the moment. Hitler Youth, yeah, congrats. What did Sing fit into the club here? I'm missing something. Just celebrating after. Oh yes, the moon. Yes, India made it to the southern pole of the moon. That is cool. That is cool. I have a plan to. Okay, let's get. Hear that Trump is standing for 2020. Is that true? Yes. Trump will become the Republican nominee for president. I am absolutely sure of it, unless there's a plane crash or some other sort of Hillary Clinton type situation there, or Putin or whoever. Will become the Republican primary, and I would say is most likely the next elected president of the United States. Trump is likely. Whether you want that to happen or not, that's a different question, but those are my assessments of likely things to happen. You can always build recruitment centers for manpower. Yes, that is another thing, but now that I have, and I'm still trying to build up, maybe unnecessarily, but I'm still trying to build up some of my trains to some of the original sort of centers here in the east to get supplies flowing to some degree. And so I have not in quite a while been building anything but train factories and getting these things done. Now we're getting mostly to the end of that. I don't know why there's 2 in Lublin, but we'll see. Maybe that was needed to get up there. So to continue to supply situations, and of course we're moving deeper and deeper in. They're dealing with that, getting the everything. So yeah, recruitment centers are just another. And I guess my point with the recruitment centers is why are they in the game? What function historically that, I mean, obviously they had historic recruitment centers, but and I know whether it's in Nazi Germany or in the United States, to the best of my knowledge, again, to the best of my knowledge, and I'm thinking of those two things, and I know photographs of recruitment centers, they were taking over pre-existing buildings, either in part or full. I mean, they might just be like a storefront in, in a big, office tower building or whatever, and just one of the bottom ground floor storefronts, or taking over a movie theater or something like that to process in and recruit people. So I don't know what, quite honestly, because obviously this is meant to take away construction from something else. And again, this is sort of mixing my knowledge from the US, a little bit from Britain, some from Germany, and mixing it my knowledge from World War I through World War II. That they're, yeah, if you're talking training centers, which are different than recruiting centers, but could sort of kind of be lumped into processing centers. In some cases, those were literally fields, and they were, everything being done under canvas, both in World War I and World War II in the United States, though as quickly as possible, and the U.S. has a lot of construction assets. They were building cheap-ass buildings that were meant to stand for just a few years before, going, falling apart on them, because they're just slapdash and quick. So I don't see why that shouldn't be just covered with national policies or with national spirits. And if somebody wants to, in chat or later on or whatever, I don't know, I'll read the chat now, but what construction type things that this should be, because again, taking away from railroad construction, why construction time for this should be a thing. Now, if you wanted to make something like this that would either be, again, drop down, placed on the map by an event or a decision, whatever you want to call it, like that, or when you get a national spirit or something, have something that fires, that drops a bunch of those things down, and maybe make it so that if you really want to do more, you could pay for it. But I don't know that it should be something that is even buildable, meaning it only happens by event, decision, or, national focus or something. To do that. So I don't know, but yes, that is a way to deal with this and would be useful, I am sure, and good for people to know. Thanks, Frog Guys. Yes, okay. Prigozhin's actually reported dead a few years ago in a downplane in Africa. He wasn't dead, though. Yes. Yeah, I get that. So yeah, if I was a Prigozhin, a Contadori, a commander of mercenary forces, and as moderately successful, I mean, he was at least greatly successful at that kind of job. Often men go, because I've known, well, I've met, maybe I should say, known might be over stated, but I've known people that did that type of work. Not just was a mercenary, but sort of commanded and organized. I've met a few of them, read some of their books, but I have met a few of them and had a little chat in a bar or something a couple of times with a few people when I was younger that did that in places like Africa and other parts of the world. On the other side, on the other side in the Cold War. A lot of them, they didn't make a lot of money doing it. They may have had a lot of money go through their hands, because of the expense of running the operation. So they might got paid a lot of money at one point or another, but trying to keep the operation running and spending it out. But Prigozhin, and from the, I have some photos that they published of going through his very nice house and whatnot. If I was somebody like him, I would have either created another identity, wear a wig, take some photos, get a passport and some other non-Russian, could be like South Africa or something, something that's sort of believable. I don't know how much English he knows, but something that's sort of kind of believable to have a passport in, and a real passport, not just a fake one, but get one set up, and under that identity buy a house, not a big lavish thing, but some place in the Caribbean or some place out in Mauritius or, the Comoros Islands or somewhere, somewhere to disappear to. And whether it's after a plane falling out of the sky, like here's this box, fly it to my good friend, Putin, and hand it over to him. And halfway through the flight, the box blows up on his private airplane or something, and, to disappear with, and he's already, disappearing down the rabbit hole. I would, just because of vengeful governments, vengeful whatever, I would have an escape plan. Whether I was smart enough to realize it's time to escape, or, nah, I'm good, I'm going to keep running my mercenary operations, they can't touch me, whatever, I'm not saying I'd be smart enough to peace out at the right moment, but I would have at least tried to set up that plan if I was doing his type of work. Okay. Required traits dependent on actual battlefield results, like RNG allows hold units much longer. Yeah, there are traits on the battlefield. BRICS is adding new member countries. Well, BRICS is a fictitious thing, Sing. You might not understand that, but it, India and China in the same, BRICS isn't a military alliance, and India is very, very prominent in saying that they're not joining a military alliance. So BRICS ain't a military alliance, and BRICS ain't an economic alliance either, no matter what they want to say, because India and China are not going to be in the same goddamn alliance. They are not going to, they're not going to coordinate their economic policies together. They are rivals, they are competitors. No, BRICS is a fictition, and it is being promoted up by whether by Russia or China and some of these other nations like India. And I think India is just like, yeah, we'll do it too. Whatever, just to sort of kind of honestly join some organizations. And oh yeah, South Africa is a member of BRICS, as the locals are, oh, we're talking on the telephone, or we're talking. Oh, damn, the power just went out. Why did the power? Oh, the locals are taking the power lines down home to turn the copper wire into something. As the South African natives are tearing apart South Africa. You think South Africa is joining a BRICS organization? They, give it another 10 years, they'll be, well, I was going to say the Stone Age, they'll be in the Iron Age. Okay, yeah. I'm sorry, BRICS is a fictition. It's something that politicians want to pat themselves on the back and saying we're part of this organization to do all this thing that isn't U.S. or whatever centered because the U.S. is the dominant power. Again, you don't have to like what the U.S. does. I'm not saying that, and we're not always right. I'm not saying we are, but BRICS is BS. Okay, yes. All right, let's get, thank you, Arno, for all that. So thank you, Singh. And I do like India. I'm just saying it's just, it's just that BRICS is nothing. Get political power, manpower, policy upgrade. You could take the going for it, which gives you 75. Yeah, folk, it does. Okay, and oh, hey, Ari, guess you're back from Missouri. That guess I don't know why you went, but cool. Was it what's the sort of entertainment town? I don't know. Just going through this is okay. Thanks, Arno, doing your job. Great. Hello. Add that. Is it? I'm probably butchering it. Don't mean to. Hey, Raga. I'm just ranting and getting through the chat. Recruitment centers are better for minor powers than major powers and likely have a way to extend their manpower, seeing how little they have. Probably very true, Ari, and maybe more setup for that. And hello, Sir Toyjet. Hello, Beam Slam. Prigozhin and Wagner both exploded. That's totally horrible. Yeah. Building them at the start, greater chance to boost minor nations. Yeah, that would very likely be true. A function with them would happen. Well, in ever leadership, PMC. Yeah. People did something like another PMC plane having landed in Moscow. Yeah, I'm not saying I believe he's dead. I believe Prigozhin's dead. But belief, and again, I'm not trying to like spread conspiracy theories or whatnot, but it's just murky enough that, how many times did we hear, Osama bin Laden has been killed? No. He's been killed? No. And then finally he was, and we had complete evidence of that. So I think Prigozhin is dead. I just not going to be 100% sure until I don't know if ever, because I don't know if we'll ever really see a body. That plane burnt pretty bad. And hello, is it Johid? I don't know, or is it Yohid? 1022. I guess we can just call you 1022. Like the rifle. Okay, the Soviets and Americans still did some trade deals. Yeah, they did. Went to Springfield to visit the Bass Pro Shop. I've been to the one in Vegas, but that is it. And Kronos were kept up to last. It's also military. You get 3 years. Okay, so, well. Now, Kronos and others, you're absolutely right about this. Now, I'm down to 12,000 manpower, free manpower, 12,000. Now, again, I may be, I agree. I think he probably did. Just saying that. Yeah, we want to wait and see if he pops up. And if he's functionally dead, meaning he's alive, but like living in a small beach house in some island somewhere off in the world and he's retired, well, then fine. I know a lot of people, and especially one of my Ukrainian friends post sort of a happy dance meme when he heard in the Discord when he heard that Prigozhin was shot down. So I know a lot of people are happy that he's gone or would like him to be dead, but as a just sort of a practical matter, well, just him disappearing is functionally good enough. Okay, the problem I have with right now, Garrison, most likely reason for your lack of manpower. Absolutely. That is, and I did think of that, though I hadn't said it really yet. Here that we are, you know, Belgium 12,000. Well, okay, 88,000. 88,000. It's not unreasonable for the French Republic, I guess. Yeah, 8 divisions or so, roughly. Yeah, and plus the divisions that we do have holding the port. So, yeah, okay. 8,000 in the Netherlands, yeah. 40,000 in Poland, and I don't know exactly how they're drawing that border, whether this is now in, I think this is now in Germany, so it's just down here. 20,000, so 2 divisions worth in the Soviet Union so far, though of course there are also dealing with the, you know, these smaller republic or you know, USSRs like Lithuania with 7,000 and Latvia with 1,000. So 20,000. United Kingdom 66, and what they're talking about is this little islands out here. Oh, no, just this Totenkopf standard. Yeah. Luxembourg, Grand Duchy of Luxembourg. Oh, this is recruitable population down here. This down here is recruitable population. Okay, but up here is that, yeah, this is the manpower that we're. Oh no, this is manpower. Okay, no, this is manpower. Where is showing my how much? That's manpower. Oh, it's here, but it's these divisions of 8 divisions. Okay, it's here. I was misreading here versus here. No, this is. Yeah, okay, so this is because we're using it's this as, you know, this little garrison thing as a division. So it's 24. Yugoslavia is 24 for secret police of these little brigades. Okay. 125 of these equivalent in Poland. Oh, God. 30 of these in the Soviet Union. 125. Now, I know these are, you know, these are just to give everyone watching template here. I mean, these are just these, so 125 of these, and 1,000 manpower. So 125,000 men, 125,000 men are hanging out maybe in here, or I don't know if it. Now, this would be considered the Soviet Union. 125,000 men are hanging out and around here. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's how that is. And so 30,000 there. So 1,000, add 1,000 to all these numbers here. Sorry, I got that wrong. So 8,000, 5,000, 80,000, 24,000, 11,000, 11,000, 24,000, 125,000, 30,000. In the Channel Islands, 1,300 approximately. Okay. So that is my manpower needs there. Yeah. So well, and we get 14,000 is said there of foreign support for occupation duties, and we are occupying down here. I think we are. No, maybe not. I don't know. Okay. Like I say, I may have made not the best choices of spending political power early on. Like I say, this earlier when we're, you know, at peace in 1938, I think is a decent, you know, situation. We should have jumped to this at the start of the war. I mean, just from like a 2-year draft to expanded draft at the start of the war. But I did not have 300 political power free, and you could go back and look at it. But I think that would be, I think going from, you know, going to 18 to 35 service ages, that's with, you know, with that. And so that we can go without any degrading of, which we are having stability issues, as those who've been watching know. And I don't disagree with pushing, you know, getting too many people that may be affecting stability. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying without that. So that's where we should be, and that's 75. And yeah, we're going to hold a, and I don't see why I don't have done everything I'm supposed to, you know, basic fundamental everything. Because again, and when you're talking a game like this, and you have all these things up here, they're part of a design philosophy that is designed to, in a way, mirror or model, maybe I should say, reality. And part of it was, and there, I don't have anybody here, but because he left, and I think I should have a Martin Bormann replacement. But whether I want to add in him here, which more consumer goods factories or Ministry of Education, you know, Bernard Rust, which was really the Ministry of Education. See, I don't know why. Bernard Rust was Minister of Education, yes. But, and they, not really innovation. But he was a lunatic and was not good, not effective. He was a lunatic. Really was messing shit up. Walter Darrier, yeah, max factories in a state down 10%. Now that would get monthly recruitable population up 10%. That would monthly, you know, monthly population growth, recruitable population factor 5%, daily fascism report. But again, that's 150 that I don't have, and have made all of the things. So, I don't want to do a habit of that, what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to, war economy is taking me forever to get there. Oh, and women encouraged. Well, let's try on. Okay, we're going to do foreign recruitment encouraged. Well, this is okay. Maybe, well, because I'm looking here. Consumer good factories. Well, civilian factory use 100%. Yeah. Non-core manpower. Subject manpower. Okay, so I'm gonna say, because most of it was in the Waffen SS, the foreign recruitment, but especially on the Eastern Front, there was others. I'm trying to play historical. Okay, I think we're going to stick with foreign volunteers here, which will get us subject manpower requirements plus 2%, master impact plus. So I don't know how much that's going to do. Foreign recruitment is totally useless. Yeah. But I want it historical. So 150, 75, 300. So see, I just, okay, well, 550, I think. So let's do yes, I just cheated because I really believe this mod needs to have things to be reasonably historical. And I agree that this may not really be that useful, but let's just do this. So okay, we're gonna do this sort of as a one time. I mean, may need to cheat again. I know we ended up slightly more, but we are moving these guys to have a parade in Paris. I don't like having to do that, but I think that will help us get to, and yes, and I do thank Kronos, Frog Eyes, folk for giving me really good policies. Okay, foreign volunteers is also used as subjects have puny manpower. Yeah, well, I understand it may be better, but I'm looking at various Waffen SS type stuff. The idea of how they help. The only way to be worth something is to have subjects to annex them by down. But okay, well, whatever. So with giving me how to do it in the game, but I think we are in a situation that it should not be here yet. So okay, so total garrisons 400,000. Now that's with a 2 million man army. So that's 25% of the army budget. Now there's only 50,000 air and 25,000 navy, but yeah, okay. So, well, I think we're going to end this episode, not the live stream, people, just the episode here. And next episode we will have action at the front, not just figuring out what the hell I'm doing wrong. So thank you all very much. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron. Okay, let's make another little save now that we've done that, and then we will continue. Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer1745, and we are continuing our Hearts of Iron 4's Black Eyes playthrough, and we are pushing well, I think. I mean, I know we're falling back there, but we're pushing pretty well on the Eastern Front. I'm liking how this is playing. Okay, they are retreating out of there. We got all these divisions here. Okay, you cross the river. You guys cross the river. You guys support that attack. So that attack is happening from multiple provinces. No, it's 9 divisions actually fighting there, but we're going to try to push up along this railway to control that. Hopefully they will be able to hold, but that may not be. Okay, well, these guys here will control that, or support that attack. Also keep them out. They're going to attack across to counterattack to help defend there. These guys are pushing in there. Oh, to cover their falling back. Right, and good. There we go. Mind you, I don't think you have taken Denmark yet in order to ask for garrison manpower and diplomacy. Yeah, no, I don't have Denmark at all. My analysis, just me, my analysis is that Germany would have been better off to have Italy as a friendly, neutral country than have them actively in the war. With them not being in the war and them, owning Albania, but nothing more here, probably, or I think they are too big of a country for even the U.S. to decide to attack, even if they are openly trading across here, particularly maybe just in resources, whether it's food, whether it's oil being purchased. I mean, if they ever found their own, they did start to look for their own oil here, but they never found any in the time period. But if they were able to purchase oil from some other peoples in the world or other resources, openly trading with the Germans, but being otherwise neutral, this basically gets rid of the Mediterranean front in the war, in my opinion. Because I don't think the even like I say, even once the U.S. is in the war, I don't think they're willing to go to war with Italy. I don't think they would, and Greece would be still a neutral country, so I don't think they're whether Bulgaria joins the war or not, who cares? But they probably wouldn't, because they wouldn't be getting this Greek territory or that Yugoslavian territory, so there probably wouldn't be enough incentive to join the war. And if you just left Yugoslavia alone, even though it's a weak, crippling country, I do not believe the Western Allies would have pushed through here. So this all becomes, if you still have Hungary and Romania in the Axis in the war, you just sit down here. This would keep this locked out here. So now with Vichy France, or unoccupied France, or however you want to say this, as opposed to free France, would the Allies have landed here if there was no North Africa or Middle East campaign? I don't know that they would have. I'm not saying they wouldn't have, because would be a lot of speculation that goes along with, is what we'll call Vichy France, is that legitimately France that is signed the peace treaty, is because, and Vichy France, even up, because you still see Paris policemen, and sort of that then switch sides to in the sort of the Battle of Paris. There was a little bit of fighting in 1944 for the Battle of Paris. Mostly it was the French rising up against the Germans. But and you see the police, most of the police do rise up against the Germans. And so a lot of this stuff going on up here is jointly administered by the French and the Germans together, with very much of the idea that, hey, if we just behave and once the war is over, we'll get most of this territory back. Obviously, they had already grabbed up this officially, and might, I'm not way down here, but maybe up here and maybe down, along here, they might have grabbed extra territory and the final analysis. But Paris, most of the industrialized North, would have gone back to Germany, is everyone's perception. If Germany, sort of somehow ends the war with Britain. Now, once you get the American the torch landings and whatnot, then it becomes clear that Germany's going to be defeated. And so, because France is allowed about 100,000 man army, a lot of them are up here. They get disarmed once, Germany moves in and occupied. But a lot of their army is also, colonial army out there too, and other places around Madagascar and other places. And like mentioning Madagascar, after the fall of France, there's like a tank company of, I think it's R-35s, that gets sent out to Madagascar. So even, after the fall of France in 1940, sometime in 40-41, they're still sending out, armored units that are, because they fought the British. I mean, it was a half-hearted fight, but it was because the British do invade Madagascar and take it over. They're sort of worried that the Japanese took over Indochina. They're worried the Japanese might take over Vichy France, or put listening posts and observation posts to, try to identify ships out here and secretly station, Japanese subs or U-boats or whatever it is. They're worried about that, so they do a naval invasion, and it is an opposed. There's years ago, just like a 3-page article detailing. You can call them battles, you can call them skirmishes. There were dead on both sides, but not high numbers of casualties. This wasn't a hard-fought campaign, but they had new, like R-35s or something. They weren't like old World War I FT-17s. They were new vehicles, and they had been sent out after the fall of France. So they're sending out to places like North Africa, to places like Syria, to places like Madagascar, small tank, like company strength tank units and things like that are still being sent around. Germany's still allowing them in armed forces. That does disappear once the torch landings happen, of course, and of course most of the brief fighting that Patton had to face down here. Oh, hey, Admiral Teague, how you doing? The main character running that, kneeling on the floor, his arms open and a slice of lemon appealing. Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I see the animation there. Cool. Thank you so much. Super sticker. Thank you. And thank you. Thank you again for inviting me for a Patton watch party. I was telling the chat about it earlier today, and it was very enjoyable. So everyone check out it. Let me just do this thing here. Where do I have it? I have it over here. Yes, everyone, check out. There we go. Pace. Admiral Teague's channel. He does a lot on Star Trek, if you're interested in that thing. So yes, and yeah, that was a quite fun day to do that. France, World War II tanks are kind of garbage. Only good thing, early war tanks had lots of armor. Yes, true, Kronos, true. But the idea is that Germany was allowing France to have tanks, which is an interesting thing. Germany was not confiscating all of the tanks, because they do use lots and lots of confiscated German tanks and often repurpose them, turn them into tank destroyers or other things. But allowing them to still manufacture or with some of the reserves that they had and ship them out around places. So, that is an interesting dynamic to look at. So, but my contention is if there is no Mediterranean action, if Italy is neutral, would because it's basically an American invasion, would the Americans have invaded North Africa, Morocco, Algeria, Tunis, or something like that, if there is otherwise peace there? Now, they would need to do that functionally to invade Vichy, in my opinion, because I do not think you can effectively, you can't effectively sustain an operation coming from someplace like Britain, because it really can't store much supplies or base anything out of Gibraltar. You'd need the bases down here to then feed reinforcements and supplies to start a second front down here. So maybe if you're going to do a second front here, but probably, so they might do that. They might decide that they, to hell with it, we got to, go after France from the southern side. But even at most, that means that Germany would have to, if it got to the bad situation, Germany would only have to garrison the French Mediterranean coast, which means you don't have to garrison Greece. You don't have to garrison, you know, the islands out here. You don't have to garrison Italy like they had to, you know, that Patton and others were fighting here and then later pushed up here. And do remember, the only reason I know this, and it should be more in the history books, on June 5th, Mark Clark takes Rome. You know, conquering Rome is a big thing in history, you know, for a nation to do it. And now the battle for Rome happens out here at Anzio. You know, it's fought here. It's not fought in the streets of Rome, really. The Germans, by that point, the Germans are evacuating to, and I forget the name, the Gustav line or whatever, the next line behind it. But it's a conquest of Rome. So the Americans under Mark Clark do conquer Rome. So that's one of, you know, contribute to America in history. But that happens the day before D-Day. And by the time that's getting ready to be reported in America or Britain or wherever else, the news of D-Day is breaking, and that's the big news. So it you know, pushes it off the headlines, really. So Mark Clark was a mistake. I would say Mark Clark is probably a good logistics general, that kind of thing like that, because he was worried about his logistics. He was worrying about his supplies. He was not a bold advancing general. So, you know, if you push it like that, so yeah, you know, to show, you know, how in, you know, again, context for me is everything. You know, one of the reasons the Americans are able to get the foothold in here, I mean, there's multiple reasons. One of the reasons the Americans are able to get and make a foothold up here is because Germany is pouring in resources to hold the Americans down here. But before, and they don't show this, and I've read his book, Singer von Etterlin, really long name. He was commanding the German forces that were garrisoning Sardinia and Corsica. And I have come in time to really admire retreating generals who do it well. And this is partially coming from a quote attributed to Frederick the Great. He really, and he obviously never met him, and he was only reading reports, but he really admired General Washington of the American Revolution, famed General Washington. And particularly, in one of the cases he was looking at was Washington's withdrawal out of you know, Manhattan, Long Island, and whatnot, in the face of overwhelming British ground forces and overwhelming British naval forces, which are controlling the waterways around here to a significant extent. But he is able to withdraw his forces intact in the face of the enemy. I don't think there was any real fighting. I mean, there may have been a few muskets popping off and maybe a couple of guys falling from it. But Washington's ability to withdraw his forces and not have them turned into a Fräulein von Singer und Etterlin. Yes, exactly. Plastic gangsta. And I can see, yes, you can see your house from here. And so, you know, and that made me think that it's one thing to be victorious and to pursue your enemy like Patton was. I know I'm falling back to it, but still thinking about it the other day. And really pushing hard that Patton could do versus, say, Montgomery, who, and there's a lot of good reasons for Montgomery to behave. We never really even got in when we're talking about it. When he was methodically moving up here, along here, and basically Montgomery, because the first battle of El Alamein is the sort of Rommel attempt to break through. Montgomery holds that. The second battle of El Alamein happens just literally at the moment that stops, in which the British counterattack and push and crush. Hey, tiny USA ball, how you doing? You can kind of see Spain from there. Well, yeah, we can see Spain. So, you know, and Montgomery has even, you know, gone so far as to set up troops that are going to go and clear paths through his own minefields and mark them out so his own forces can rapidly go through his own minefields. Meaning that they had to clear the minefields because they wanted to stop. They were well put to stop the Germans, but he was planning that, okay, well, once the German offensive breaks, we need to then, before they can catch their breath, we need to go on our own offensive. So we need troops trained, with metal detectors and probes and whatever to clear the mines, because you don't want them blowing up clearing them. You want to do it quietly and get them cleared, and then put have the ribbons to put on the sides of the cleared area so tanks and men know what sections are cleared. He has all of this prepared and trained, set up, so he immediately counterattacks. I am sort of glossing over things here, but but set up to immediately counterattack. And so he overruns a lot of the Italian forces because they're non-motorized. So and some of the German forces are non-motorized. And so all the non-motorized forces he's overrunning. But there has been a history of British forces one time getting somewhere in here. I don't quite know how far, but several other times back and forth around here, that the British forces outrun their own supply lines, and whether it's the Italians at first and then later the Germans, are able to give them from bloody noses to even worse and drive them back. He knows that his supply lines cannot run from Alexandria to Tripoli. That's just too long. Montgomery knows this. Now, could he have keep a light pursuit force to gobble up a few more units, few of the units that were, stationed back in Tobruk at the time that El Alamein happened, and start walking back? Yes, he could have. But he sees that you can't run the supply line, so you have to set up, naval supply at Sidi Barrani, at Tobruk, at Benghazi, and whatnot, as you're moving along. And so he knows all of this stuff. So, and it's also, again, to analyze Montgomery here, Montgomery is a British general who understands what's going on with, and we'll use the term, the British Empire. I know places like Australia and Canada are basically independent, part of the Commonwealth, but functionally independent. But he loses most of the Commonwealth support by 1942. And I'll explain what I mean here. In 1941, and you'll see in some of the movies that are really good, like The Desert Rats, a lot of the forces here are Commonwealth that are fighting in North Africa. They're from Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, India. He loses those. Now, those forces are still there. But what he loses is more forces, because there's even like a new, fresh, I forget which British division gets sent down to Singapore and basically surrenders in Singapore and not even part of the fighting up here. So even British forces are sent out here because at the end of 1941, December 7th, we all know, Japan attacks Britain and America and the Dutch. Well, New Zealand, Australian forces, they've got it. Their now priority is to defend Australia and New Zealand, and so they're now having to fight here. India has the largest all-volunteer army during World War II, and there is not just the Indian Army that's part of the British colonial system. India does not look like this. India is a patchwork of different countries, shall we say. There are for the British administration, there's 3 administration zones, one up here, one down here, and one sort of out here. But there are a patchwork of Rajas and other sort of princely states, and some of them, many of them have armies. Now, whether they're large or small or just sort of semi-militarized police forces or whatever, but Britain needs to have, and then of course there's, bandits, and, we can see, still in northwest Pakistan, there's still, hill tribesmen that are fully armed to this day. So there's, bandit occupation, there's anti-independent occupation, there's just simply peacekeeping. This is a huge place with huge numbers of population. You need a military police keeping forces to keep riots from happening or whatever. So you have, whether it's, English or Scottish forces needing to occupy here, plus your locally raised forces, and whatnot. You have all that needing to happen here, but you now have the Japanese on the Burma, border here. So he's in essence, they're getting trickles of manpower from India, and when Iraq revolts against, because they even revolt against their own king, but revolts against sort of British oversight. And it's a semi-independent state, but they revolt and go to the Iraq. It is actually the command elements from British India that they get the forces to come and put that down, not drawing them away from the forces that are on the front. So that's sort of the Indian army moving in and fighting the Iraqis. So Montgomery knows this, and so Montgomery can't just charge out there with a division and it gets captured, no problem. No, he can't. They know they're, like we were talking, our manpower problems here. They have manpower problems. So Montgomery needs to move up, needs to push. He knows that the main failure, and there's multiple failures in different elements of his previous commanders, but he knows that the main failure is outrunning the supplies and having your forces strung out instead of concentrated. And the reputation, and he fights really hard because Rommel becomes the boogeyman to the Commonwealth, the British forces here. So he wants to fight that reputation. So he does not want to have one single reverse, to have one single panic of people running away or whatever. So again, you can tell I do have a certain admiration for Montgomery. So Montgomery, yes, he's a plotting general, but he's really built up the supply and his forces to deal with multiple elements, and fighting the Battle of El Alamein. He fights it, and basically he just sort of follows, if you will, the Germans to here. And France had a reasonably strong fortified line along here, which the Germans occupy, because the Germans had not occupied Tunisia prior to the Allied landings. I say it's Allied because it's also British landings over here. They only start occupying it, the Italians and the Germans occupying it, after those landings, and this is going to give them the shortest supply route to supply. And they create, sort of overstating it, but sort of fortress Tunisia. And that's sort of where we pick up the Rommel movie. But, would they, like I say, would they have landed had there not been a war being fought down here in the Mediterranean? Maybe, maybe not, but I don't think they would have gone after a neutral, because they didn't go after a neutral Spain, which was known to be sending arms and known to be sending critical resources into Germany. They did not stop Spanish ships on the high seas. They did not do anything like that. So I don't think they would have with Italy. So at worst, you would have that much more garrison for Germany to defend the coastline. At best, they wouldn't even have to do that. And if you didn't have, like I was saying earlier, if you didn't have Germany having to, once Italy pieces out, need to occupy Rhodes, Crete, mainland Greece, worry about fighting all of the partisans in Yugoslavia, defending the French coast here. Now, with Singer von Etterlin, like I say, is once it becomes very apparent that this is where the main Allied landings are happening, he gets the orders, and he masterfully, without a single loss of life, without a loss of any equipment, he gets all of the German forces. They withdraw, because they don't really garrison Corsica. They know if it's going to happen, it's going to be landing in Sardinia. He withdraws out of Sardinia, across the water here, get up to here, and crosses back to the Italian mainland with all of his German forces intact, all of their equipment, all their supplies. So he withdraws them and realized, well, no one was landing. Yeah, no ground forces were landing, but you got to realize the British and the American navies and submarines are occupying here. There's British and American air power is hitting the various points around the the Mediterranean. So this is in the face of the enemy. Now, it isn't, again, in the face of ground opposition, but he does it, and he does it rather masterfully for a very little known general. But does it quite well, and I admire him for being able to carry off that maneuver. And so his, I think it's like 2 or 3 divisions. It's not a huge force, but that's 2 or 3 divisions that couldn't be thrown against the D-Day landings. This is, all the rest is Smiling Albert's, Albert Kesselring's fight in Italy could not be thrown against the Allies. So had all of these German forces that were in Italy, the Hermann Goering division, which was sort of a supersized division, very well equipped, other divisions, other armored divisions, other infantry divisions, and then whatever that was occupying down in Greece, if that could have all been thrown against the D-Day landings, I don't know that the Americans, even with their overwhelming air power, even with their naval gunfire of 16-inch naval guns blasting away from the sea, which are damned effective. Even with all of that, I don't know that the Americans, even with their mobile harbors, could successfully land, get a bridgehead, and push out. They could with that, and obviously so many troops that are fighting away on the Eastern Front, and troops that are garrisoning, and this gets back to where we start. There was at least one panzer division sitting up in Norway at the time of D-Day. Now, it was a panzer division that mostly had Panzer IIIs, some Panzer IVs. It was a panzer division, yes, but sort of an out-of-date panzer division. And it was sort of broken up into small bits to, control things here. But if Germany didn't have to control here, have troops here, that would be that much more. And even though the Americans, production-wise and whatnot, could overwhelm the Germans, but can they overwhelm them at a concentrated point? I think Germany can produce enough artillery shells, machine gun rounds, enough of the artillery pieces, and enough of the manpower to deal with a concentrated landing. It's the dispersal that allows D-Day to happen as much as anything else. We also talk about the bombing behind the railway systems, and we can talk about there's a bunch of other elements that go into allow this to happen, including Garbo, the spy we talked about the other day, sending information out saying that it's going to happen at Calais. And I mean, there's a lot of other factors going on. It's not just a factor, but each factor adds up and is part of the puzzle. So yeah, I would think, looking back at it, that if they could have kept, even with the interruption to the high-grade steel coming out of Sweden during the winter, and the winter is long up here, because it can come during the summer, and it's up here, it's being made year-round. It's just the railway or whatever connections down here, and or the port itself, ices over in the winter here, because this is much colder here than here, because this does get sort of Gulf Stream warming to the water here and whatnot. That doesn't happen here. So they're able to ship it out during the long winter, and winter meaning more than like 6 months. This is unusable. But had they put up with the Swedish ore coming out then and allowed the rest, it might have been better for Germany ultimately. And okay, let's see. So Indians, Australians, New Zealanders, South Africans, absolutely. The presidencies of exactly past the gangster, Madras, Bengal, and Bombay, although by World War II, as the vice-regal administration over all the three. Yes, yes, as plastic gangsters. And hello, Ken Tool 01, how you doing? Doing well here. Yes, they start out as sort of independent elements under the British East India Company, and yes, by World War I, they're under the vice-regal administration overall. But to my knowledge, they're never the same, in the sense that they have different administration styles as legacy styles, and yes, they're maybe being more integrated, more, made more the same than they were before, but they're still sort of directing out from the earlier East India Company period, and it's the Indian Mutiny that brings in the British overall government. So, yeah, Singer von Letten was one of the driving forces behind modern Bundeswehr. Yes, one of the guys who wrote the Himmelrod paper, or whatever it was called, that convinced us to rearm Germany as a NATO ally. Yes, I do. Like I say, I do have an I'm not a big. I read his book. It's been more than 20 years since I've read his book. I have it over on my shelf, but I do sort of admire him as and to the best of my knowledge. I mean, he went along with the National Socialists, but he wasn't some evil guy from all of his occupation and other things. Have you researched winter equipment yet? Well, again, I'll have to check, but there's been a lot to research, and I don't know that I have. I'm trying to, where is, oh, nope, not yet. But, oh, I did, let's zoom in here, mentioning that topic here, again, I'm saying I don't think I've had enough time. I did prepare for a long winter war, which reduced my stability even more and lowered my war support. But I did do that. So that will reduce some of the winter attrition elements I see here. So we did go with that. All three developed from trading posts. Yes, whatever they're called. Yeah, they sort of call them factories. They weren't manufacturing factories, but yeah, they took the style of government from the local principalities. Absolutely. Yeah. And my friend Singh, who is here, may or may not agree with me, but I do believe Britain's governorship of India was a net, an overall positive. Because India, whether it's the Mughals, which are, the corruption of the word Mongols, and other various occupations coming in from the north, India is a mixture of local influences and external, not just European, as I'm saying, with the Mongols, occupation that has gelled, and India is a diverse and something that is not well known in the West, at least in the United States, but is a very interesting place. And I do believe Britain was ultimately, I understand why they want to be independent. I'm not saying they shouldn't want that, but I do think Britain was ultimately good. I mean, there were bad things, I'm sure. I know so, but I think ultimately, on balance, Britain was good for India. I think it gave them that taste of Westernism that has helped India a lot. I have the book behind. What's it called? Yeah, neither hope nor fear is what I believe it's called, or at least my version is called. It may be translated differently, but yes. So yeah, I'm not good at memorizing things or whatever to quote things, but and it's been a long time since I read it, but yeah, I think it was another little vignette was, and he's a German general, and one of the things he's through his campaign is he has a bathtub. Now the bathtub isn't like a bathtub you're probably thinking of. The bathtub is basically like a field cot, that sort of legs that you set up and you sleep on, but it's a tub, it's a canvas tub. And so, and he uses this throughout his campaign, just however hot the water is, on a fire or something, you pour it in and you get in and take a bath. So he's had this through his campaigning career, at least as a general, for some time. And after he's taken prisoner, he still has it in his other luggage, but I forget where it was, but he and a bunch of other, at least generals, but maybe colonels and somewhat are brought somewhere on a train. This is after the war is, just ended, he's a prisoner. But it wasn't very much of being a prisoner, if you will. They're on a train to get to somewhere, and they get taken off the train, and and they go, oh, well, you got to go like 5 miles or something down the road to whatever place. And he's looking at his his suitcase and his sort of extra sort of suitcase supply thing with his bathtub, and realized, I can't drag all this stuff all that way. It's too much stuff. There's no truck to throw it into. There's no, other supply. So what he does, instead of going on and marching to the camp, he just right there pops open the bathtub, at the train station. I guess there's a water faucet, and takes a cold water, fills it up with cold water, and takes a cold water bath, and gets himself clean just out there in the open. I don't know if he's wearing shorts or not. Just uses it for one last time. He gets dressed and picks up just one piece of luggage and marches off to the next officer's prisoner of war camp thing. And I don't know where it was. I don't know if it was in Italy or in Germany or where it was at the time. But yeah, it was an interesting little funny thing. I remember reading about him at his and elements of his prisoner of war experience. Huge positive. India was chaotic. Well, I don't know if it was a hellhole, but compared to world standards, I mean, it wasn't Europe, but Europe was also fighting. What was that concept of Well, the national concept didn't really exist. You're absolutely right. Various ethnicities. Well, and even to this day, the concept, it broke up between Pakistan and now Bangladesh and India, the remaining name. But yeah, they didn't even stay together. And even Pakistan, East Pakistan or West Pakistan and East Pakistan didn't even stay together. So yeah, it broke up. Maybe not into all the little tiny states that it could have, but it did. Yeah, I have it now. It was neither hope or neither fear nor hope. Okay. We have, but I haven't read it yet. I must have had it 10 years or more. Yeah, it's a good little book. If you're wanting to read about it, it's good. I'm not saying it's great or anything, but it's good. So yeah, yes, Germany controlling Norway does give them abilities to push up on this front, but they never take Murmansk. Finland right now is in its own private war, and it's actually embargoing us and not allying with us and fighting the Soviets. So, but even if Finland stays neutral, yeah, allies aren't always a positive gain for you, as I'm saying here. Okay, so let's look down here. They're pushing on him. These Romanians are coming here, but we got one guy retreating. We got a couple of divisions there. So let's start our push here as well. So that will pin these forces so they won't concentrate too much. We're getting these guys across the river to attack up from the south here instead of trying to fight our way across the river. Okay. We may remove our attaché, but I'm not going to do it under protest here. Okay, these guys are running to there, so we're going to push to here. Yes, it's easy. You got Kherson spelled with a C instead of a K there, and you got where's Kharkov? Kharkov is way out here. You got Kiev back here. Yeah, last night I spent a few hours talking with somebody in Ukraine. And not just about the war, but yeah. And if you research logistics or radio support company, they would give lots of new division, or you could unlock lots of new divisions to upgrade old ones. Yeah. Okay, we will Okay, so logistics would be okay. We got logistics company 2, and we don't yet have signals company 2. We have signals company 1, so we could do that. Yeah, eventually we'll get to 42, which won't be terribly long. Yes. Yeah, well, these, yeah. I'm refusing to call this Kiev because it's Kiev to me, and it's been Kiev, and it may be more Russian influence. I get that, but it's the name I know the city as. Okay, you're going to support that attack, but we don't want you leaving the locality. I guess I'm a person that wants to buck fashion and do my own thing or whatever. So we're going to attack there, and one of the divisions here is going to support that attack. Okay, so these guys are coming up here. We're going to push to here because that's going to complement that. And okay, these 2 divisions are going to go there. These guys are going to go here. And these guys are going to go here. These 2 divisions are going to go here. They're coming up there. They're retreating there. Good. Okay. Well, they look like they're in fairly good shape. So we're going to push there. I think these guys are just going to go north. We got the other ones moving that way. These guys can move that way and that way. Okay, so now we are pushing here. Let's support that attack. I can just go to gobble up the railway there. You know, they're not connected yet, really. Well, yeah, not really. Okay, that fight was won there. They're sort of counterattack. They're occupying there, and they are occupying there. So you attack across the river, and you support that attack just to keep them from reorganizing themselves. All the Indian princes were constantly fighting against each other. Oh, of course, yeah. Only justice they had access to was their Lord Raja. Yeah, well, see, this is one thing that yeah, that Britain really grants to the world the sense of justice and the sense of a justice system. And God, it's imperfect everywhere I can see it. So, you know, whether in Britain or in the United States or you know, other parts of the world, but it's definitely the idea of a justice system that Britain does give to the world. Yeah, well, our manpower here is, you know, not doing great. That is why, and I cheated in instead of waiting for things like this to happen, which would then allow me to it may have happened a little while ago, but allow me to do a military parade in Paris that will give me 78 political power in 30 days. And so doing it without the sort of cheating was going to take a while. Yes, the settee, the thuggy. And I would say a lot of, at least prior to British rule, there was an educated class, but what really happens is a Western educated class starts showing up as opposed to a more religious educated class that was there before Britain shows up. And just because something is part of the culture doesn't always mean it's good, doesn't mean it's bad. It's just the thing. Okay, these guys are now pushing up through here. Let's add in them. Okay. Well, I know we haven't played very much, but we're going to end this episode here. And I want to thank Tim, Strongarm, Niagara, Timothy, Sertoyjet, Garrett, Marcus, Folk, and the great Hoffmanator for support over on Patreon. But everyone out here, can you just make sure you give the video a good thumbs up? And if you're new around, and you can also post a comment. Just say hi is cool. You don't have to say anything much if you don't want to, but say hi would be cool. And of course, if you're new around here, please subscribe to the channel. See you next time for more, yes, even more Hearts of Iron. You triggered me. Hey, MMDB. And I'm sorry, Rhaegar, you triggered me. You triggered me there. And I'm gonna. They would have developed themselves. Imagine how India would look today when they had not tried to mimic the UK. They would have developed themselves. I want you to explain to me, or give me examples of humanity developing themselves. Hey, Niagara, just thanked you a moment ago for your support, but hey, good to have you here. Of humanity developing themselves that wasn't either based in Europe or influenced by Europe. And I for anybody who's watching this who doesn't know me, I don't give a fuck about anybody's race. This isn't about race. This is about culture. Culture. This is about what becomes known as Western culture. I look at Japan. Japan doesn't like what it's seeing with at first Portuguese and then sort of Dutch traders coming, and they shut their country down and go hide under the blanket. And yeah, they get rid of the warring states, one of the many warring states period under the Tokugawa shogunate. But there is, to my knowledge, functionally no cultural, political, again, they're not doing massive civil wars, but there's no cultural, political, or technological development in Japan until Admiral or Commodore Perry shows up. I forget what his rank was at the time that he showed up, and forces Japan to open its doors. China. Prior to the Opium Wars and other wars to force open the doors of China, and I've read about how, I love good historical fiction. Good historical fiction is done by somebody who researches two elements a lot. One, the sort of history and a lot of the sort of like military history, so the battles and the events. But two, researches the cultural, situation. So it's not one of these things that are set in the Scottish Highlands, but it's modern sentiments. No, they Dewey Lambden passed a few years ago, and I've read his books that are set in the latter half of the 18th century. But he did lots of research, and he had the people speaking the way they spoke. Whether they were, because he was an American, but whether they're American or English or French or whoever, and really try to give the cultural viewpoints of that. So I like good historical fiction that does that. And this is one of, he and amongst others was talking about some of the early, before Hong Kong existed, some, down here in Canton, and how the early traders were kept in their factories, that they literally, a building that they couldn't leave, basically, at least overnight, in a little small section of town that they sort of all in there, or their ship that was out in port. That how China is always looking back to the classical era, the Confucian, the classic, as they sort of call it. I'm sort of ranting here as I'm forgetting some of the terms. And if things aren't going well, we're just not interpreting the classics correctly. So they're always backward looking. So I don't see any development in China before forced to. Do we need to mention Africa? Okay, do we, no development there. I don't see, before Columbus arrives, the Americas, North and South, are in the fucking Stone Ages, people. Yes, in Mexico, or, the Aztecs in Mexico, or the Incas down in Peru, yes, they worked gold and silver. But that was it. And one of the people here, and I don't know if he may have even been Toy Jet, or somebody said, oh, but they weren't, they weren't culturally or something necessarily in the Stone Ages. I don't think you fucking know, or we fucking know, exactly what the culture was like in the Stone Ages. We're just looking at their impressions on the ground, where here we have written examples of Columbus and other, the different conquistadors. I'm blanking on the ship, or the people's names. Sorry. Coming in, and they're written accounts of the culture. So we have written accounts of Stone Age culture. And yes, these are sort of empires, and they were building huge stone buildings and doing very remarkable things without iron or copper. Well, yeah, to my knowledge, they don't use copper tools. They definitely don't use, bronze or other mixed metal tools, to my knowledge. Yes, not everyone's living in a teepee out in the forest, but this was in the Stone Age, and they did, to the best of my knowledge, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, they did not have the bow and arrow. They had the atlatl, which is a sort of an extra little stick behind a very light throwing spear that could actually go rather far, and it was rather cool. But they didn't have the bow and arrow. Obviously, horses just weren't around. The only beast of burden, to my knowledge, that was common, was the llama. Actually, llama in Spanish, but two L's in the front is equal to a Y. The llama down here, as a beast of burden, and not really a riding beast. It was, pack animal. They did not have the wheel. They had rollers, but they did not have the idea of an axle and a wheel. Is best, again, to my knowledge, before the Europeans showed up. So all of the Americas are in the freaking Stone Ages. There is no development going on. No development that I'm seeing going on here. They got to where they were. Now, I'm not saying everybody out here, obviously the very primitive, the Aborigines down here, very, very primitive, but not necessarily so primitive here. I'm not saying that. But they got to a certain plateau, and they plateaued. They didn't go anywhere. Okay. Now, the Arab and the Turk, whether it's the Seljuk Turks or the Ottoman Turks, their spring to life, their flowering of, quote unquote, their culture, all happens only because they're both sort of nomadic barbarians. The Turks are from out here, the Arabs are from down here. Only happens after conquering classical civilization, what Roman civilization, that, yes, I know there's Persian states and they were civilized, but their flowering, their numerical system, their all of that science that they can talk about when Europe is in its sort of medieval phase that is flowering, is only happening because they're taking places like Egypt that, yes, had the ancient Egyptian culture remnants still there, but a lot of it was primarily Greek, but also Greek and Roman cultural influences that they're getting, and they're getting these classical works of Aristotle and Plato and reading them. And that, again, European influences is the only thing that's getting these, and I'll read the chat here, and I see it scrolling up there, is the only thing that gets these sort of cultures up and rolling and actually doing pretty good. So a forward-looking I don't see outside of Europe, and I'm not saying there isn't, like, oh, somebody figures out a new counterbalance system somewhere and that slowly spreads over some region, or, oh, like I did point out that under the Tokugawa shogunate, I don't know how much nationalism is going on in a sort of modern use sense of the word, but we're getting away from a lot of warring. I know the warring states is, different time periods, but lots of, if you will, often because we see it looking back as a single country, civil wars going on, and samurais fighting each other in Japan, and it's really cool as a military historian to research all that crap. And again, I love it, but I'm not an expert on it, but I love the idea of it. But we see the samurai, perfect the samurai sword making qualities of steel, when a lot of places are still using iron, and they really get this really high-tech sword out there, and some other high-tech elements for the time period. But then they stop. They don't seem to progress. They get to a point and stop. Same with China. Yes, China has, the Mongolians and India. And I know Singh may still be around, and I'm sure he knows it better than I do, but from an outsider, I see India, yes, it is being influenced, and I think somebody, mentioned it, Temujin and the Tamerlane and other, Tamerlane is who I was thinking of. Temujin, of course, is Genghis Khan, real name or whatever. That are sending forces in there. So India is a bit of a developing element, but they're getting stuff coming, filtering through the Persian empires, filtering this way from Alexander's conquest, filtering down from here, and other stuff in there before the British, before the Dutch, before the Portuguese show up. Yes, that is sort of a mixing and whatever. And yes, they for their time period, they do some really wonderful engineering feats and whatever, but they do sort of plateau out as far as I can tell, and gets there, and there doesn't seem to be, quote unquote, progress, whether it's technological or sociological. I know India is a great melting pot of ideas, and they have, Hinduism, and out of Hindu, Buddhism is a Hindu kind of idea that sort of the people separated off and take it, through Tibet and out to, to Japan eventually. And of course, Islam is brought in, and there's Jainism, and there's Sikhism, and there's probably whatever society, and other sort of ideas that are coming out of India and coming into India that are gelling, and it's a very vibrant place, especially, and some people, very vibrant in the ideas of the mind. It's a very mind-focused development of whether it's enlightenment or other thing, as opposed to, again, they have their technological capabilities, absolutely, but it doesn't seem to be a political cultural type development, or it doesn't seem to be a technological development hub. This and these people is where, quote unquote, progress comes from. Now, of course, yes, Americans and whatnot are legacies of these people. In my opinion, we would be still way back at whatever, technologically, culturally, the idea of accepting of slavery, because slavery is helpful and useful, because the slave is working the well pump or whatever, and they're just without, because the thing that really finally gets rid of slavery. I know we still have lots of slaves in the world. Whether we talk the Uyghurs or we talk people that are thinking they're heading towards Europe, that are coming from sub-Saharan Africa. I was talking about some of this last night, but are coming to this lawless part. My understanding is this is still sort of warring states, and in what had been the country of Libya, whatever it really is now, that there's a slave trade here of people, and I don't know what they want the slaves for, but they, God, I don't want a slave. I have no use for a slave, because I live in a technological industrial world. If I want cool air blowing on me, I turn on an air conditioner. If I want to send a message, I get on my computer. If I want to heat up my food, I put it in a microwave or an oven, and I do it. And it just, so industry, and because industry is technical, you don't want an unmotivated slave who's going to sabotage 1 out of 10 of your toasters and put it together wrong. You want somebody who's motivated, and so you positively motivate it by money, as opposed to negatively motivate it by the whip, if you will. And so it's only because of Europe that open slavery or acknowledged slavery or whatever is gone away. For all of the sins that and guilt trips, because we were talking about guilt trips last night as well, but the guilt of success, I don't feel any freaking guilt at all. And when I look at whether it was, We Are the World and the other concerts for the literal starving to death people down here, that I love the concert, I don't feel any guilty for doing good, because we tried. We fucking tried, and each country that tried in different ways. Yes, they were exploitative, because to build a road, to build a railroad, to build a port, it costs money. It costs effort. Okay, people? It costs effort. So to develop the shithole of Africa or develop other parts of the world, you can't just do it all on charity. Like, oh, the Europeans should have come in and showed up and, hey, we'll build you a port. We'll build you a railroad. Don't worry, it'll be free. No, they needed to be paid back for it. And so it's quote unquote, we need the resources in your country, whatever it is. And is it fair? I don't know that it's fair. That isn't the point. It isn't necessarily to be fucking fair. It just is the way the world works. And because you're part of the world, let's look over here at your part of the world is a primitive whatever. Oh, hey, yeah, this was Indian territory, and they followed, 5 tribes followed the buffalo up and down here. Needs all this space for the buffalo to roam, and that's inefficient use of land resources. Sorry, guys, we're taking it over. You don't get to follow the damn buffalo north and south all the time. The buffalo don't get to go anymore like they used to. We've now stopped the buffalo. They're no longer an endangered species. You can get buffalo meat. They grow it on farms if you want, true buffalo meat. It's not, again, there's plenty of buffalo now. It's not going to be endangered. And there are wild buffalo. Don't worry as well, that too. Or bison, technically. I mean, we call them buffalo. They're not the same species. But, these people were fucking cannibals that did mass, as in tens of thousands in like a day or a week, human sacrifices, okay? These people were, in essence, as evil as any fucking Nazis, okay? Like, oh, hey, we captured these people. We're going to rip their hearts out and eat it. Yay! Huh? So, so if you want to, cultural imperialism, yes, the evil imperialists stopped the human sacrifices and cannibalism. So I am fed up with this I'm staying away from colors of skin because, again, I don't care about colors of skin. I live here, and I know people of a particular color of skin that vary so much in their attitudes and their ideas that I can go and encounter them all in the same day. They have the same color of skin, and they'll be, as if they're from here, as if they're from the South in America, or as if they're from some other continent, or wherever, maybe who I'm talking to, and they'll have completely different attitudes and completely different ways of working. And I think it has nothing to do with the color of their skin or any sort of genetic things in any meaningful way. There may be minor, teeny little whatever, but not in any meaningful way. It is the culture in which they are raised and grow up in and understand the world in. That is the determining factor. So it's Europeanism. Now, I think the height of Europeanism is coming out of the Anglo element, because it is sort of a mixture of German and French and whatnot, and various legacies, because, French is legacy of Rome and whatnot, that creates the British, because we can look at the Italian experience in Africa and the British experience in Africa and the French and the god-awful, horrid Belgian experience of, their... Yes, what they did to the people down there. That's it. It's one thing to when the locals come charging at you with spears and you shoot them. That's great, because you're defending yourself. And yeah, you may be like taking over their land, but talk about, let's say, somewhere between half and a third of the residents of what modern day Zimbabwe. Hey, those European dudes, they're really cool. We love those European dudes. Why did they say that? Because the other half of the people that lived here, that were in here, were terrorizing them and driving them into the hills and stealing the good land. And the Europeans came in and shot anybody who resisted, yes. And then goes, hey, yeah, y'all live in peace. And yeah, we're taking the good land ourselves, but we're going to, try to keep people from starving. And yeah, you can have your own tribal lands and your own sort of stuff. And so half of them were like, yeah, dude, this other tribe group, and again, the Shona and whatever, I got to look it back up to try to get back there again. Yeah. When Cecil Road and crew is coming in here, yeah, they're actually bringing civilization and stability and no longer terror raids. Somebody isn't going to just come in to try to drive you off and shoot and rampage around. No, the European farmer came in and took some land away and, orderly, did things that the locals might not have liked, but it was a hell of a lot better than the other dominant tribe or tribal groupings or whatever you want to call it, that were terrorizing the other half of the population here. So they really sort of liked it. Now you get the communist propaganda, and it'll be so great once we get rid of these white people propaganda that are a few generations later that they bought into, and look how shit it's turned in that. So yeah, and so you look at the difference between Portuguese, Africa, and whatnot, but at least outside of Belgium, but outside of Belgium, at least most of these places, whether it was, and you can see this definitely, I just know because I read and listen in English, there may be as much going on in some of these other languages, but there was a lot of do-gooding spirit of, part of it is to bring the true religion of Christ, as they would say it, but it's also giving them wells and teaching them to read and write, and sort of trying to teach, a lot of do-gooding going on purely out of the goodness of people's hearts, in England, that would raise funds to send the missionaries, that would, most of the missionaries were both spiritual and practical, it was a mix, they were sort of trained to be, practical people to survive in rough country, but also try to, give them, hey, this is how you build a well that, has a thing in the air that spins that automatically pumps the water out of the ground, something simple like that. Teach these people simple things to improve their lives, as well as bringing, the word of Christ or whatever they would, however they would say it, to the unenlightened people. So some of them were pure do-gooders. But even when they weren't, again, sorry, Belgium is the one sort of negative example, they were mostly yeah, here's jobs. Here you get jobs, and you build this railroad, but you get food, and you get a better house. And when the railroad is bringing other goods here, trust me, it'll get better. And yes, we're also using it, of course, to get the mine, to get the iron ore or whatever out of the ground. But it's improving things. So Europe, to the rest of the world, has been such a net positive, such a development that I don't really see prior to significant European. And again, God, I know I'm not right on everything I'm saying here now or in my life. I'm not that sort of an arrogant person. I'm sure I get some things wrong, and there's maybe a good example somewhere that can pull out that these people were on, the Eskimos, before the Europeans were showing up, they were almost ready to start making steel. No, they weren't even making iron, or the, the people of Antarctica. Oh, wait a minute, there's nobody down there. You might be able to pull something out of your butt that really doesn't have, that I can point to as European influences. Yes, I do know that, like I say, steel in the Japanese samurai swords. I do believe there was steel. There were definitely early steel making, but it was, crafted steel, and there wasn't mass production steel in India before the British show up. I do know that. And there's some really good steel. There's like a super old steel pillar that they built way back when. And I do know these things, but they got to a certain point in my understanding and plateaued, and maybe once in a while a new breakthrough that would spread out, but it was just ever so minor, and there was no the future is coming, let's go and develop it kind of thing before European significant contact. Because I would argue there's no colonization. The only time you really get real occupation, obviously, is after World War II in Japan. And that does change Japan from getting rid of they still have a remnant element of the idea in Japan and places like Taiwan, particularly. I don't know about mainland China, of normally when you go to work for that company, you stay to work for that company for your life. So there is still a feudalistic element in modern day Japan, but the real sort of practical grinding poverty feudalism is gone in Japan. And that is, I would say, mostly because of American occupation post-war, and they were already heading down the path. The Zaibatsus, the big industrial concerns, were definitely improving Japan, and played railway empire. And I've done a little bit of research about some of the railway stuff in Japan. Yeah, they were definitely heading towards a more modern world. It was definitely accelerated and partly Americanized by our occupation, which I believe, not just giving them baseball, but other things that have given them a beneficial period. I know face, the idea of face in Asia, and it's stronger and less strong in different countries, but in the culture is a thing, and they might not want to admit it. And they, that losing World War II and having Americans occupy them is a net positive, but it really is a net positive for Japan going through that relatively brief from what it is, 1945, end of 1945 through to, I think it's 1958. We were officially, Japan did not exist as an independent country. It was an occupied place. So they taught this, some meme thing I saw, I think it was 1958. Well, the new Japanese flag is basically the same as the old Japanese flag. Yeah, the reason it's a new flag is because it's now newly a country that, even still then, they didn't really get to have armed forces, but now a newly, country that is no longer officially being occupied by America. And it really wasn't a colonial, because we weren't sending colonists over. We weren't really trying to exploit, resources out of Japan. We were remodeling Japan into a modern, slightly more Western society. They are not a Western society. Don't think I'm mistaken. I know they're not Western, but slightly more than they were, because they were, they picked Western clothes up and a few other Western habits up prior to the American, occupation. But under MacArthur, and, MacArthur may not be doing all the daily heavy lifting, but he's overseeing the situation and putting the people into key key positions, and whether they do good or they do bad there is sort of up to MacArthur and changing it. And so it's really MacArthur is the person. I mean, there's lots of people involved, but is the person that shapes modern day Japan. And man, again, the character, whether it's the, if I want to go claim the American character or MacArthur's character, as much as you want to diss him at times, you have a man who is because the reason he has all that extra gold braid on his hat that he keeps into the end, just because it becomes sort of stylistic for him. And you can look at his uniform, I have a very interesting picture after West Point, so this is like either World War I or some early thing. His sort of tailored uniform. It doesn't look like it's tailored correctly for most American uniforms, but it's all the right stuff. But it's very sort of stylish done. He comes from rather rich family. Patton is maybe the richest officer in the American Armed Forces in World War II. From his mother's side is very wealthy. But Patton comes from MacArthur comes from a wealthy enough background to have very privately bought tailored uniforms. But the reason he has all that extra gold braid is because he's Marshal, or what I'm pretty sure I'm getting the term right, Marshal of the Philippines. Meaning that he's not just an American general, he's also head of the Philippines Army. But he's head of the Philippines Army. He sees his army captured. He sees with meeting the prisoners as they're being released, including meeting with General, I believe, Wainwright, who's a skeleton of himself, and others, especially, in Japan, and the horrors that the Japanese do to his soldiers, to men that he was responsible for. And he was planning on staying there, partially out of you better come, if you want me out, you rescue me, you gotta, you better send reinforcements. But once he realizes reinforcements aren't coming, he is still, I think, very willing to stay and share whatever fate he's going to share with his men, but he's ordered out. And I think he realizes that, not that he's necessarily an indispensable general like Washington was, nobody was going to step up and replace Washington in the American War of Independence. He is uniquely the man there. There are other very good generals. We still might have got our independence maybe, but Washington I really think without him, no. And MacArthur isn't the indispensable general. You do have like Stilwell out in the Burma field that could have been moved in, who is another very highly regarded general. The reason we don't see a lot of praise for him in World War II is he's in a very, one, a sideline front, and two, one without a lot of maneuver, and a very second, but he is secondary, mainly a British show command, but he is still a very good general. As far as I can see, both from praise from others and me looking at his campaigns myself. So others could have come in and dealt with the American, campaign of the army moving through the islands. And I'll get to the chat, people. I'm not ignoring you all. But he goes through this, and when you're responsible for the lives of people, and I know I see Admiral Teague is mentioning Patton again as well, and maybe overdoes in the movie for dramatic effect Patton's bravery, but to a point, a general, if he dies, he's just lost his burden of responsibility for the lives of however many thousands of men under him that I know they feel. I mean, you got to be the most uncaring bastard not to feel for the casualties under your lives. And you just sort of goddamn hope that your decisions meant that there were fewer casualties than would have been otherwise, because you're fighting in a war and you're going to lose people. You want the fewest casualties. But you got the guy who was responsible for all the Americans and the Filipinos that were mistreated by the Japanese, now running Japan. And he could have been, and it's without being fired from the Americans, without doing anything super radical, he could have been much more vindictive. he could have been humiliated. I mean, they do the one sort of meeting with the emperor, with Hirohito, little guy standing next to MacArthur. MacArthur definitely looks dominant. And that's definitely a photo that they want to put out there, that it's big American general dude in charge, not this revered, formerly said to be a, god emperor, because that's what he was, a god emperor. It's now the god emperor is MacArthur, if you will, however much god he is, but he's now the emperor of Japan, functionally. You may get your little guy back. We aren't humiliating him like we... Hirohito, in his surrender, because he made that surrender speech on a record that they had to actually fight to, they fought other Japanese troops. His palace guard fights other Japanese troops to be able to get to the radio station and broadcast the emperor's message of surrender. But he is willing and accepting that the Japanese emperorship is done, But no, MacArthur leaves it. Now diminishes it from any sort of religious idea that they are the god emperor, that they're just the emperor now. And, MacArthur could have been just humiliating him and his imperial family. I mean, they shrink down the size of the imperial family, who gets to have imperial titles and government support under MacArthur, get rid of some of the cousins and other types. But, they're still family members, but they no longer have any officialness to it. And the Zaibatsus, the big, big industrial concerns. And I don't know the details, and I'm sure some are maybe broken up and whatnot, but they still get to exist. Japanese culture still gets to exist, even with, picking up all the extra samurai swords and all this other stuff that is officially done and they have to turn in, and all this other stuff that goes on, even without being, some sort of sadist and putting up weird camps that would get MacArthur fired or something. Even without doing that, how magnanimous he is got to be, characteristics. Oh, yes. All right. Yeah, I know there still is an emperor, but there is no longer a god emperor, because officially he was a divine being in 1945. He was still literally a descendant from the gods in everything, that his image and all was as sacred as any other god kind of thing. Hello, cool, clever Stone. How you doing? We'll get to the chat, guys. So, yes, I did watch that of The Last Emperor under Henry Puyi of China. Did watch that too. But so, so whether it's partially, yes, very much partially MacArthur's personal character, but MacArthur is raised and shaped in America, so I would say it's the American character, that they're improving to Japan for all, and not just that we were attacked on, December 7th, but the way they treated prisoners, American prisoners, the way they treated civilians, both American and British and others, and taking Hong Kong or Shanghai, how nicely we dealt with them, I would say is a remarkable thing. And so this goes to my premise of Westernism. I am, as you can tell, a Western chauvinist. I believe Western culture, Western identity is the best on the planet. Now, it shouldn't all be one culture, because I do believe competing cultures generate new things that hopefully are better than some of the old things. Some of the new things are bad, and hopefully will be discredited over time, whether it's ideas, ideologies, or religions, kooky things that various religious organization types, and you can imagine and pick your own what you think they are. But, things like that will come and go. Some technological things that were a great and cool fad will disappear into the dust of history. But and so if it was just monolithic one culture, that would be bad. I really do believe so. But everywhere has ultimately benefited by Western culture. And even the fucking Congo benefited, because they were butchering each other themselves, and we saw what happened in Rwanda not so long ago, And that wasn't because of anything Europe did. That was just one ethnic group butchering another ethnic group. So even how bad the Belgians were, I'm not defending that they were okay, but even how bad they were terrible. It's still eventually. Now, once the Belgian actual government, because they were Belgians running it under Leopold's private reserve, but they were all Belgian people. But once the Belgian government got in control, the real horrors stopped, as far as I can tell. Again, as far as I can tell, I could be wrong. So it wasn't what it was, but Western culture, everywhere it has touched, has made things better. And I would argue under the Shah of Iran, I'm just seeing it here, is much better because he was westernizing his government. And that's part of the reaction and counter-reaction that happens than the mullahs that take it over. And yeah, there's still a fair amount of Western stuff bubbling under the surface there in Iran because of that. But, because of the Shah. But it's still, that. And not everything Western means modern because, like I say, Japan and China are very modern. Oh, and China. I mean, they were, like I said earlier, they were always looking back on the past. It isn't until they get Western ideologies, and especially if you look at the early Republic of China under the nationalists, they are radical leftists. Not quite communists, but they're radical leftists, and they were actually earlier, in the early stages, they were in a coalition with the communists, and then they break apart. And so that is Western ideology, whether we're seeing it as state capitalism or whatever, under communism with Chinese characteristics in modern day China, which is sort of fascism. Not exactly, but easiest, shortest word, single word description I would say is fascism, as I would say China is, the mainland China is today. That's all Western ideology coming in there and changing an ancient civilization. So it isn't Karl Marx's communism or idealism or whatever. It isn't going to be that. It's a mix of these Karl Marx and other philosophers intermixing with Chinese isms, both cultural, Confucianism and other things like that, as well as technology, as well as geography and language. So it is a blend. It's not going to be any one thing, but it's that blend that makes China develop, that makes India develop. It's the blend. So, okay. Now I'll get to the chats. I know I've been ranting. I hope it's been fun. Okay. How far back do I have to go? Okay. Okay. I don't know if I'm going back. Moving French tank divisions fairly behind German lines. Okay, gamer. What about this? The Chinese gunpowder before European golden age of Islam. Okay. We're just going to start with, I hope I didn't miss anything significant. Chinese gunpowder under there before European. Okay, Chinese do not have gunpowder. Chinese did not make gunpowder. Please listen to my words very carefully. China did not make gunpowder. Don't know exactly what they called it, but I'm sure it wasn't gun, because they didn't have the gun. They had rockets and firecrackers. And they would throw the firecrackers over the wall and they go pop, 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 and scare the other Chinese, the wars around. China, yes, creates a black powder that was very unstable, but would blow up. Two things happen once that powder formula makes it to Europe. One, the Europeans playing around with it realize, when you mix black powder, because when they started to use gunpowder, firing guns here, they would show up with the materials and mix the gunpowder in the field while they're looking at the castle they're getting ready to shoot at. They'd mix the gunpowder up. Not so much because it was too dangerous to move beforehand. No, it was because if you mixed the gunpowder up 3 weeks earlier or something and then brought it to your gun, it wouldn't work because the powder would separate or wouldn't work very well. So you had to mix it. And since you had to mix it just before shooting it, you might as well mix it up and keep it safer. It was the Europeans learned that you mix the gunpowder up and then you douse it with water. And you get it wet. And then you very carefully grind it again. And that will bond it together to keep it from separating. So corned or mealed is some of the terms that were used. Gunpowder was created by the Europeans. The Chinese never investigated this, never went down this road. It was that very quickly, within a number of years, they come up with mealed gunpowder so that it would be a stable, last for years in its mixed form and still be able to perform. And two, Europeans developed the gun. China kind of sort of has rocket tubes that spew sparklers at the enemy kind of thing, but they really don't have projectiles of the gun. So this is my idea is, yes, periodically you do have something like, I'll get, maybe some people have already covered this, we'll go through the chat. They do have very often elements that do develop here or there, but it's Europe who goes in and gets this idea. It's Europe who really gets the idea of movable type that comes out of China. Yes, before that, Europe had printing presses prior, or printing, they knew about, the idea of carving blocks and do printing, but it was the Gutenberg and the movable type, each letter and doing that stuff. That is where they take what is, I think, basically a Korean that does migrate into China, the idea of, type. And they did have, a printing block type or whatever before, but not really much. That, and they get it into Europe, and then they make, really, it blossoms out into movable press. So yes, Europe does latch on to other things. Okay, and yes, Ari's getting to my point there. I never actually did anything with that. Most of the so-called Islamic Golden Age was regulated Roman Greek science. Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying, that Europe had forgotten it. Then it's getting Europe there. The fact of the matter, Europe is Roman mentality in a way, because it's also Germanic, which wasn't Romanified. So I know Ari is big into Latin stuff recently, but it's a mix of Germanic and Latin and Greek, I would say. It's all three elements. It's Greek to me, partially referred to Latins talking about Greek, but not understanding Greek writing or Greek. I'm talking during the Roman Empire era is when it's all Latin to me, or it's all Greek to me. It gets first coined, obviously in Latin, but it's also sort of the introspection elements of society that Greeks did, that Rome really only sort of absorbed from Greece, and then of course continued with it. Stoicism translated into English would be porchism, because they sat on a porch and talked about what the Stoic ideas were. Porchism, Stoicism, is more of a Latin thing, but it comes sort of out of the Greek tradition that the Romans absorbed. Romans were much more of a practical element. So I would go a mix of ancient Greece, a mix of ancient Rome, and a mix of Germanic, because you have the Anglo-Saxons, and maybe just a little cheerleading for it, Celtic elements, but because the Celtic elements are from Gaul and Britain and other places, but definitely Latin, Germanic, and Greece is a mix. And it very, obviously more Latin in Italy than in modern day, in Britain today, but it's what the percentage of the flavors are. Listen from the people. Yes, far greater. Some say primitive cultures are more developed society. Any culture that doesn't have indoor plumbing is fucking primitive, and I don't want to live in it as a daily basis. Going camping, cool. Living in a fucking forest without indoor plumbing, if you have a nice cabin with indoor plumbing, get to shit inside in a nice warm place in the winter, that's fine. But if you got to go outside to do it, no. So, primitive isn't nearly as good. I'm sorry. Japan invasion into Korea, or she defeated the Chinese cannons. Yeah. It's part of it. Westerners could discover things, commercials. Yes. I'm just going to skim through these. A lot of what we employ, we found elsewhere, but where it was Chona discoveries, mysticism, and hoarded knowledge for everybody else. Yeah. Oh yeah. No, we lot of knowledge we gained from other things. But what I'm talking about, I'm not saying, again, listen to me carefully, is I'm not saying that China and Japan weren't, shall we say, well-developed societies when Europe shows up. They were. Okay, they were. What it was is they weren't developing. They had gotten, to my opinion at least, they had gotten to a certain plateau and stopped. That's my contention. Okay, and it varies at what level the, because again, I am talking about some very high-end steel techniques, and like I know it's in other Asian countries too, but I'm just highlighting the samurai sword that we can point to that are hundreds of years old, well before any, and this is part of it. You know, a 500-year-old samurai sword is just about as good as a 200-year-old samurai sword or a 100-year-old samurai sword or whatever after Europeans showed up. They don't improve. They got to a masterly level at making those swords, and it's good, and it stays that way, and they don't improve. So that's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying everybody before Americans showed up were some Stone Age, super primitive Amazon rainforest people that didn't even have, you know, hardly any flint knapping or whatever. I'm not saying that the world was that before Europe showed up. I'm just saying is they all got to a certain level and then stopped. And it varies on that level in different parts of the world. And part of it can be explained by how hot it is and how hard it is to work beyond a basic level of, yeah, once you got enough food, farming in the good parts and whatnot, and then the primitive lives up, you know, hunter-gatherers live up in the highlands, and the more developed people live in cities in the lowlands where it was, and then they just sort of stopped because it's hot and no one wants to move around more than they need to, and there's diseases, and, you know, there are physical reality elements of the environment that do affect this, most assuredly. So, be like, we make space missions, also India. We won't give infrastructure and basic necessities. Yeah, you know, India is a non-evenly developed society. That is quite true. Yeah. Yeah. As Rhaegar was saying, yeah, I don't see if I had a slave, I have to have, where's he going to sleep? Or if I wanted to hire somebody to come in and clean my apartment or something, I just pay them. So voluntary work that is positively incentive, like I'll give you something if you do this, as opposed to I'll whip you if you don't. Yeah, I don't want a slave hanging out around here. You know, and yeah, if I was a little bit more wealthy, I might have somebody come in and clean up my apartment or something and do something for me. But that, you know, so having somebody do some labor for me wouldn't be a bad thing. But I don't want a slave. God, no. Stephen Ambrose says forced labor is sabotaged ammo. Oh, absolutely. Forced laborers will sabotage whatever. At some level, at some things. Corporate slavery, yeah, and there still is corporate slavery in the world in one fashion or another, like in China and places. Yes, but it's not exploitation if labor is compensated for worth. Yeah, you may say that, folk, about the exploitation, but you're thinking maybe in the modern day world in which there's a welfare state. But let's say, oh, hey, somebody mow my yard, I'll give you a donut. And these people are people that, well, that'll be the first meal I've had in 2 days. Yeah, I'll mow your yard for a donut. Now, is that exploiting somebody? Because there's people that otherwise are going to starve to death because, you know, the police are strong enough to keep them from breaking in my house and stealing my food. And I have plenty of food and I can go to the store and buy more food, but they don't have a job. And since they don't have a job and there isn't enough charity, and these people are starving, but I'll give you a donut if you mow my yard, and oh, great, I'll get a donut. So yes, positive compensation can be exploitation, can be. because there may not be a practical alternative. So yeah, we'll just say that. Let me gloat and say the church has long sought enough to condemn slavery. Britain was the first nation to outlaw. Yeah, Britain was the first nation to outlaw against it. Going with cattle herds, that would be called ecological farming nowadays. Well, I don't know. They don't seem to like us ranchers much, but whatever. Not quite. Someone needs Naxis. Massive self-genocide of the Aztecs were stopped by the arrival of the conquistadors. Well, I don't know if it was self-genocide. It was going after other tribes than the Aztecs. They might have eventually run out of the other tribes to conquer and enslave, but I don't know. No, it's pizza. Okay. Gamer, if you don't get, we have respect for you. It's not for us to judge. Oh, and eat our, yeah, exactly. That's what all the literal woke moralists, yes. Romanized Celts. Well, yes, we do. If you're talking about Gaul and Cisalpine Gaul and the Gauls over here, they get fairly Romanized and whatnot. And of course, looking at Britain and Romanized, those living in Londinium in square houses were fairly Romanized. Those living out here in round houses probably weren't very Romanized. And the big difference I see for Romanizing Britons as opposed to the Irish Celts or the Scottish Celts up here, the Picts were the Scottish Celts there then at the time. The difference is that when the Anglo-Saxons come into here, it had been long thought, and back when I was being taught, that the Anglo-Saxons replaced the Celts. Not that they necessarily killed all of them, but they killed most of them and drove away was the idea. But modern genetic testing by populations in very isolated areas, and then testing some very ancient bones that go way back, shows that they're genetically the same people. Why did they think they were conquered and replaced? Because before Rome shows up, Celts live in round houses. When Romans are here, outside of the main Roman settlements that are created, and outside of the big farms, buildings that estates that the Romans set up, Celts live in round houses. So in their own communities, they live in round houses, and when the big farm, the big sort of plantations, if you want to call them, that the Romans set up, yes, the big manor house where the Roman family or whatever, or the Romanized Celts, because sometimes they can tell from the artwork that they appear to be Celts living in there, that live in big square houses on that estate at that same time, because they can look at coins found, deposited in some of the round houses. The if you will, the peasants or the workers or whatever, in quotes, are living in round houses. When Romans leave, because they get the Roman legions and get called back because of civil wars, and the Celts are standing around going, what happened to the Romans? Excuse me. What happened to the Romans? They go back to living or they continue living in some cases and go back in other cases living in round houses. Celts, and I don't know how much it's practical. We can examine that in a moment, to how much is cultural, as in Celts and corners and spirits in the corners, is my understanding, is there's something to deal with that. So they sort of want round houses culturally and not just practically build them, because when the Anglo-Saxons come in, everybody, whether in the Anglo-Saxon controlled towns or the countryside, everybody starts living in square houses. Everybody. Now, they did note that ancient holy places and often burial places continue to be used, but they notice I can't give you all the details of it, but the burial styles change. Well, they stay the same from pre-Roman to post-Roman Britain, Celtic Britain, and in a location, because they can date some of this stuff at various means, whether modern technology or just finding an ancient coin or something in the burial. continued to be used. But then after the Anglo-Saxons, they had long noticed different burial styles, different ways of cremating or different urns or whatever. It doesn't matter. Different burial styles. And they just thought, oh, well, people realized that this was a holy place. So the new people decided to just bury their the new incomers to use the old holy place, because periodically you could also find a church on a very ancient holy spot, because again, from, stone circles or other things that they know that it was a very ancient holy spot. So sometimes you see Christians reusing the same spot. So they thought, well, the newcomers just use the old spots. Well, again, now with whether it's looking at bone fragments or other genetic stuff, no, it's just, yes, they were conquered by the Anglo-Saxons. The Anglo-Saxons came over as warriors, and yes, they did bring a fair number of women, but it just become the fad to live and speak and be Anglo-Saxon instead of be Celt. And so he's buried there. So they really believe that most of these cases is just the same families living in that same location for 1,000+ years, just do a new burial style. And when they convert to Christianity, it's not new Christians showing up and using an old Celtic holy place. They just build their church on the old holy place because it's the holy place from the ancestors. And so it must be holy, so we'll do the new Christian there. So this is why, yes, there is definitely Londinium and other very Roman influences in here, but it is not all Roman, especially out here where it's no Roman. Other areas, it's only somewhat Roman. So we'll continue on, but just to give you an explanation here. Many people realize that the British colonies in Africa actually cost money to run. Yeah, everything costs money to run. Why is the current African mantra is that that's the whole thing that triggered me, is we stole land. We didn't steal any land. We conquered it. Just as, I know in Canada, the official legal is First Peoples, that they want to call the Indians. They're not the fucking First Peoples. We recently, in the last few years, found some like 30,000-year-old or some massively old human footprints in stone. It had been mud at the time. And looking at the genetics, my understanding, we may come to new conclusions someday. My understanding is the genetics of most all of these people that they can test, here that are not contaminated by European genes, come from somewhere in Asia about like 1,000 years ago or something, sometime. So they're the second or third peoples. They're the pre-Columbian peoples. Yes, before Columbus. Yes. But they're not the first peoples in the Americas. I don't even know whether the first peoples came from the east or the west or when they came, but they pre-existed. I don't know if they were replaced or just mixed in, but their genes weren't very strong numbers. I don't know. But yeah, we conquered it just like they conquered each other. We just did it better. Someone someday may come and conquer us, do it better than we do it. Yeah. I know I know the wheel turns. I know the wheel turns. In many ways, the U.S. is on top of the game in the world, and we have our problems. God, I know it. But someday we won't be. I know. Evil Belgians, now they're ruling the EU. Yeah, okay. 13 colonies were indentured servants. I don't know if it's half, but there were. It really looks at when they're showing up. And a huge amount come in here. I don't know. Indentured, I think, is overly talked about, but it's definitely part of it. Just going through the chat, Brits must be Japanese look far better in their traditional clothes when they kept their hair and when they used, we can talk about clothing some other time. I don't think I want to go into it now. Sounds plausible. Belgium was formed by the Habsburgs out of the Low Countries. No! Plastic gangster. Belgium wasn't formed by the Habsburgs out of the Low Countries. What the hell are you talking about? I thought you knew history better. Belgium is formed by the British. Belgium is formed by the British. Prior to this being Belgium, it was part of France. Revolutionary France takes over what had been prior to that was the Austrian Austrian Netherlands, which was prior to that the Spanish Netherlands. The Habsburgs, the House of Habsburgs ascends to the Spanish throne when the Bourbons get the Spanish throne. They have to. They agree that the same king will not be in Paris and in Madrid, so it won't be this. It'll be a split of the House of Bourbon. This territory here stays with the Habsburgs, so it transfers from the Spanish Netherlands, which had at one point been all of the Netherlands, up into the Dutch part, modern day Dutch part. And so it transfers from. So it starts out as the Spanish Netherlands, transfers over to the Austrians. So, yeah, but modern-day Belgium is a creation, and King Leopold, particularly in that family, is related to Queen Victoria's family and the Saxe-Coburg-Gothas and the whatnot, the German principalities that is set up. So Belgium is sort of post-Napoleonic Britain's creation, very much so. Dismantled your own empire, right? Yeah. Member celebrates the joint history together called the Commonwealth. Yeah. Well, you didn't dismantle your own empire, plastic gangster. Your empire, you were exhausted by 2 world wars and you couldn't hang on to it. That is really what had happened. The Vienna Congress. Okay, think of. Can't think of any other empire with a fan club of its old conquered territories, can you? I don't know. I have to think about that. But yeah. There's, yes, still emperor, okay. Actually, Japanese had traditional of electing 14-year-old emperors and keeping them away from power. Yeah, Rhaegar, well, yeah, no, the emperors had lost power until the Meiji period and the bringing down of the Tokugawa shogunate, multiple generations of the shogunate. The emperors had become figureheads for a long, long time. For a while, way in the past, yes, they did rule. But even when it was close to emperor, it was still a wholly believed position kind of thing. Region, Spanish provinces, okay, Treaty of Vienna. AI girlfriend simulation showed me I just need to be myself. Well, good. I'm sure the AI is always correct. I'll hail our new overlords, the AI. Flemish, yes, as a part of them. Walloons and Flemish. Just trying to catch up here. People who are opposed to Western chauvinism would be absolute hypocrites if they did not give up using indoor plumbing, urinals, seated toilets. Yeah, seated toilets, they did exist in other places in history, but are very much a Roman thing. You should embrace indigenous toilet cultures. Yes. Well, the Belgians actually created 2 ethnic groups. Yeah. Oh, I know. Yeah, it's messed up. Was Democratic leader of Iran. Thanks to UK and US. Yeah, we got rid of Mossadegh because he was going to flirt with the Soviet Union too much, we thought. Fascism with Chinese characteristics. Yes, MMDB. Yeah, I mean, it isn't ideological fascism. It isn't exactly Italian fascism. But the closest single word I can come up with describing modern day China, modern day CCP China is fascism. Iran was fine, but with Anglo politics fucked it up pretty hard. I don't think so. I think Anglo politics. Great. Thank you, Admiral Teague. I hope you like my rant. Glad. And hey, look, and I know Admiral Teague and I are getting to be friends here and all, and he's still sort of new. I talk about politics, I talk about history and culture and society, and I have a viewpoint and I express it strongly. I welcome other viewpoints. The only two strong proselytizing things, because I know I can be wrong about things, and I'm also conditional. What is good for let's say Luxembourg, the little country of Luxembourg down here, trying to run the borders are sort of here. Yes, Luxembourg down here might not be good. Same government policy might not be good for Germany. Country to size. So I'm not necessarily a particular ism, though I'm influenced. Different political organizations. But I have two proselytizing things. Are one, communism is bad and evil, and guns are good. Guns are good. They are a net positive to society. Until guns show up on the planet, we don't have democracy. Oh, ancient Greece, gamer, ancient Greece. Yeah, that was the ruling tribes of Athens, because they sort of call themselves different tribes. They're not like the Indian tribes. Different sort of political or different sort of organizations within Athens. The ruling tribes that were the voting peoples, that they had non-voting peoples, and then they also had slaves. This wasn't it was a democratic thing in which people voted, yes, but it wasn't mass voting democracy like we think of it in the world. It is only once you get rid of the idea of a guy who can afford a full metal coverage, armor, and a really nice sword, and spends all of his time practicing, he can go beat up on a bunch of peasants with pitchforks and rule them. Until you can get to that thing that everybody can quickly learn and become, not everybody's equal with using a gun, but you can always shoot somebody in the back. So guns are a great equalizer. Guns are also the greatest anti-tyrannical thing because I save a lot of beams and I use a few of them once in a while, but one of them recently was a quote by Hiawatha, the wannabe Native American senator, blanking on her name right now, said, if you need 30 rounds at hunting, you're not very good at hunting. If you can't govern an armed population, you're not very good at governing. So, and use another sort of quote from, started out definitely as a socialist, George Orwell. The job of the state is to keep that, I don't know if he said musket or rifle, because he was sort of referring to America. Keep that musket or rifle above the fireplace, meaning not to make the population so angry that every home should have like a rifle over the fire, sort of traditional American he's looking at, that keep the homeowner from wanting to grab that rifle and go after his government. Do not piss off the population so much that they want to resort to violence. And yes, you'll have the aberrant nut job who will go do something very bad, but so the job is to keep that off. So to me is communism is evil and guns are good. Otherwise, hey, there's a lot of different solutions to things and we can all talk about it. So again, if you're new around here, that is my mantra here. Otherwise, so I'm happy with people that disagree with me. And I'm willing to talk about things on it. Let's see. Okay, notice the problem is people's preconceptions. There are also trap cannons, wooden ships show they're innovative, brave, and plot, of course, position. Yes. Better not. Okay, right. Smaller noses, Tootsies. Yeah, I don't know about all of the things. Wellington had rocket at Waterloo, Chinese mercenaries. Oh, Wellington's use on the rocket. Yeah, it was useful. I don't know that it used much rockets at Waterloo, though. I don't remember a rocket corps. I know Wellington uses rockets in the, Spanish campaign, the Peninsula campaign, but I don't know that they had rockets at Waterloo. But no, they're not Chinese mercenaries. Yes, Niagara's with me on the use of toilets. And hello, Starstreak. How you doing? Toilet civilization. Yeah, and it's indoor plumbing. And of course, modern day, we can add electricity to that. I do not want to, I could live in a cabin in the woods as long as it has decent electricity and decent indoor plumbing. But short of that, I don't want to live in the cabin in the woods. Depends very much on where you are. British tribal ties remain very strong throughout Roman period. Okay, Czechs still have about 40% Celtic German genes. Yes, I don't know much about, I mean, I know bits and pieces about Czechia, but not detail. Sink them in the peat bogs. Okay, there's a lot of historians who believe Native Americans just conquered and pushed out other groups of people. They were there before land. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, it wasn't. It was nowhere near any sort of idyllic, oh, live in peace with nature. No. They just didn't have industrial means of doing things mostly. And yeah, they might have had here and there good little ideas and things, but they were stagnant is my contention until the Europeans showed up. Okay, they can on the original habitants, yes, and we, First Nation. Well, okay, First Nation, not First People. Okay, yeah, but I don't know that they were the First Nation, and because one nation, nationality, I don't know that I know they had tribes and what we would today call them confederations. I don't know what they would have called them in their language, whether it equates to properly to a confederation. I don't know that they had an idea of a coherent national ethnic group or a coherent state that would be First Nations. But yeah, thanks for the correction. So in Canada, it's just to be a politically correct bullshit is all I think it is. They're fucking Indians, people. This is India. This is India. Okay? I'm sort of getting this. This is India, okay? This is India. This is India. This is the West Indies. And we're using either English or Spanish or Portuguese terms right now, or French, because they also use these terms. I'm speaking in English, so I'm using English terms, but it could also be similar sounding word usage. Local variations may be this, going down to here, Dutch East Indies. India. This is the East Indies, okay? So this is India, people. This is India. This is, again, I'm speaking in English. This is India. East and West Indies. So these are Indians, either here or here. These are Indians. Again, that's my language, not me personally language, but the English language and what these people are called. These people call themselves the Seminole down here, and the Iroquois up here, and the Apache out here, and the Navajo, and other tribes everywhere else. I don't think they had a defining term. We could call them pre-Columbian people here before Columbus discovers America. They didn't call themselves America because that's Amerigo Vespucci or whatever gets his name tied in. He does show up, I think, and make some maps and whatever, but he's after Columbus. Don't really know the details of that story, but they didn't call themselves Americans. That wasn't a locally used term before it. They called themselves by, and so if I'm talking about the Seminole Indians or the Iroquois or the Mohawks or whatever, I'll use their tribal names because that's what they would call themselves. And I'm a Native American. I was born in America. My parents were born in America. My grandparents were born in America. I am not a newcome colonist. I am a native of this land now. Yes, my ancestors come from basically this island here, maybe a little bit from here, but mostly from here. Depends on how you draw the lines. Yes, those are my ancient ancestors. Just like, again, like I said, all of these people, again, we could be wrong, but the genetic testings are blah, blah, blah. But as far as proper modern cultural, is they come from somewhere up in here.
You know, these people migrated over some sort of land bridge. They think, you know, when an ice age dried up, whatever, doesn't really matter, but this is how they believe they got here. And they came down here and they populated this area. So their ancient ancestors come from over here. My ancient ancestors come from over here. We're both Americans and we're both now natives to this land now. So this is why I don't like, I mean, I'll call them Native Americans, but I don't like the term because it's dividing us from them as opposed to being, hey, I'm Anglo-American, if you will, or Scots-American, or Anglo-Scottish American, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, that's the flavor that I come from, as opposed to, I don't know, Italian-American, or Polish-American, or Indian-American, or Chinese-American, or Japanese-American. Yes, we come from different flavors around the world, but we're Americans. These guys are Americans. I know sometimes when I say, no, we're not, we're Canadians. Where's Canada? It's in America. Okay, this is the United States of America because this is California and this is Virginia. This is, Quebec is, yeah, Quebec is here. So these are Quebecians, okay? But they're Americans. These are part of the United States of America. This is the federal state of Mexico. They're also Americans, okay? We're all Americans and we're all North Americans. It's just because we're not specifying, well, I'm an American from California, Arizona, you know, rattle off 50 state names. We just, United States of America, we lump it all in. But they are Americans as well. We are all Americans. We are different types of Americans. Some of us want to be, you know, separated off in Mexico, and that's great. We shouldn't, I'm not saying it should all be one country, but we're all Americans. And the idea that should continuing to be the idea of a specialness or distinction as somebody is more righteous because their ancestors were here before the other people's ancestors. So am I more righteous of an American being an Anglo-American? And yes, I have ancestry that goes, at least some of it, and I'm sure probably even some more, but at least one family line, some family member did research to go back to the colonies before independence. So I came here before the Chinese Americans came here. So am I somehow better than the Chinese Americans that are more recently come here, whether they came here in the 1870s or whether they came here in the 1970s? No, we're all effing Americans, but we may distinguish, you know, different flavors of America. I am a proponent of this, and and when I talk about like Canadians being Americans, well, they are, because they are gone through, whether they are, because I've known some, at least one guy I knew who was a Canadian, but he was from China, from Hong Kong, or, you know, his family was from Hong Kong originally. Now he was, you know, a Hong Kong Chinese, grew up speaking English as much as Chinese, but, you know, and immigrated many, many years ago up to Canada. And so they have their own different immigration stories, but they are the similar sort of immigration type stories that other Americans have. So that's why they're Americans, because they're no longer Chinese or English. And I'm used not just British or something specifically. They're not the English. They're not the Chinese in China. They are the various types of Americans here. So that's why I sort of, First Nations, First People, I dislike. And yes, we can identify as Indian Americans or, you know, other things. So here, let's go. Belgium is British made fake country. Yes, MMDB, sorry. Yeah, that's fine. They were Flandrian and Wallonian, absolutely Niagara. Habsburgs, leaders that got there where, no, mate, Belgium came into existence, first Congress of Vienna after Napoleon, but it was Belgium separated from the rest of Habsburg provinces. Yeah, you're talking details, but that's basically, Congress of Vienna is, the whole process is created by the British push for that, as opposed to leaving it French or other sorts of things. Yes. Elizabeth Warren. Yes. Fake Indian Elizabeth Warren. That's who I was thinking of. Yes. Yes. There was a rocket battery. Okay, Beam Slam. I know I've read a book on Waterloo many years ago and I just forgot. I do know that Wellington used rocket batteries. willfully living like it's 1799 is why they decided to Unabomber was insane. Yes. Oh, living in the woods in the shack. Yeah. Don't need plumbing in the cabin in the woods. Outdoor dry toilets are fine. Yeah, you may say that, but in wintertime, no. Sorry, no. I want indoor plumbing. Indoor plumbing, not just plumbing. Burning down forests because they lack tools to perform proper clearing. Absolutely. The Native Americans you're talking about, or Africans too. They also did that too. Used the rockets in the siege of Stirpatambia, which we killed the Tipu Sultan. Yes, I've actually read some of the Sharp novels that the later made written novels, but dealing with Sharp's earlier career in India. I also get the idea of interesting. Come on, not even 30 generations born in one country. Yeah, I know, Radgar. Well, again, this is, like I say, my old ancestry, 30 generations going back here, various parts of this island chain here. Absolutely. But just at least one family descendant tree path is definitely in this area prior, in the 1750s or so. So they probably married some other ones or whatever that were, 100 years before. So, but yeah, my ancestry, the most recent of the sort of, 4 grandparents lines, as far as I know, main sort of lines back, the earliest one that I know comes into the Virginia colony in the 1750s, I believe it is. And the most recent one comes over to Canada right around 1900. The generation there, I think they have total of 6 children. I'd have to look it up. The first 2 are born in Canada. The other 4 are born in Maine. They had immigrated into Maine at the time, and brought all their children into there. So that was right around 1900. So British history prior to 1900 is also my family history. But after 1900, it's all pure American. And American history since before independence, how far back in this part of the world, which can go back to the 1600s or even 1500s. The Virginia colony is older than the sort of famous Plymouth colony up in Massachusetts. So Virginia was sort of the first colony. So I very well may have ancestry that goes back, just tangential lines somewhere way back to the first, permanent colony here of Jamestown. I don't know, but definitely. I'm very American and I use these terms specifically at times, sometimes England, sometimes Britain, sometimes Scotland, because I'm talking about, sometimes when I talk about old Britain, I'm talking about Romano Britain. Sometimes modern Britain, I'm talking about, the modern day country or the United Kingdom. And I do know the Scottish, a lot of them come up, the Scots are an Irish tribe. The Picts are the local Celts, and eventually they war and conquer and eventually sort of melt together. But sort of my ancestry, through at least from being from the Scottish sense, Irish too. I don't know if I specifically have Irish ancestors that leave Ireland and come to the United States or something, but maybe, I don't know. But definitely, Scots and English and some from way back, time of William the Conqueror, Britons, which very well is a mix of old Gauls and fleeing Britons from the Anglo-Saxons that then get back to Britain. So yeah, so it's sort of very much from here. And yeah, probably because of some of the stuff, probably a little bit of Norman, whether how much Norse or whatever. But so this is where my ancestry just to come. So my history, as much as anybody who's born here today is my history is theirs. We both share that equally. I think we first got to the boats before the laying bridge. Oh yeah, they very well could have come by boats. I don't know, Admiralty. I don't know, and there's a lot of speculation. Okay. He is insistent he was not insane. I'm forgetting U.S. The young country. Yes, we are. Relatively speaking, the U.S. is a 400-year-old plus endeavor. I remember my first main trip around Europe in a package tour, there were several Australian groups with us because it is done through a British company, and they were just celebrating their 200th anniversary. And this was like back in the late 80s, early 90s. I forget the exact year. I think it was like 88 or I forget the year. Go, wow, 200 years? You haven't been. Oh, yeah, we celebrate our anniversary from our independence, where they celebrate their anniversary from their founding in Australia. So, I forget 15 what, or whatever the foundation of, so very early 1500s, I forget right off the top of my head, the founding, because you have the earlier Roanoke colony that fails and people disappear, captured, killed, I don't know. But then the Jamestown colony, I believe, is the first permanent one. And again, that's in 15 something. So we are about 400 years old as an endeavor. 100 or 250 years or something old as a independent nation. So yes, in that sense, we are young. Okay, so yes, because of decisions, it was the Unabomber frustrated lawyers who, yeah, they got the shack. They're here. Okay, before that, yeah. And again, yeah, I'm sure, I know Congrave and the rocket things. Yeah, Congrave, there was father and son, both involved with the Royal Artillery, developing various artillery elements, including the rocket artillery. They were rather sort of innovative people. So yeah, the father and son, if I remember correctly. Russians and Russians could definitely disagree with that. The Congress of Vienna, the British Conference, strange we didn't make them all come to London. Hey, yeah, Sharpe's Tiger and whatnot. I read those many years ago. I didn't finish Sharpe's latest book. I do have it on audiobook. I should get back and finish listening to it. I was listening to it on a recent vacation, and I just didn't pick it up after it. But yeah, just listening to the audio. I guess this technically means Trudeau is an American. He doesn't mean we can send him to you. Yeah, I hear you, Frog Eyes. Okay, now I'm thinking it might have been Wellington, who was junior commander at Serpentarium under Harris. Yeah. Mysore, yeah. Old Scottish, yes, very old Scottish. Family that very because of certain I'm not a genealogist. I've had genealogists or family members that research to a specific, to specific people living or born in a specific town or city. I don't want to get too specific. In Scotland, in one thing, but because of the family name and the way Scotland works, I can generally get connections back, and you can probably make some guesses, back to before 1066 to a Breton family, a Breton family, that was involved with the Normans, that we know that there are connections. So whether it's all the eldest male line or anything like that, I'm not trying to say that, but just that, yes, connections back to the ancient Bretons, that were they're a mixture of the refugees from Britain and the Gaul, because if you look at the maps that I see, Brittany here is not directly ruled by Charlemagne, Charles the Great. I'm sure it's some sort of sub-controlled territory, but it is sort of remaining somewhat independent from the Charlemagne conquest of Europe. And so I think it does, and those are the Franks. So I think there's a lot of Gallic Britons fleeing the Franks. I'm sure a lot stay in place, but a lot of the Gallic Britons fleeing Charlemagne, and a lot of the Romano British Britons fleeing the Anglo-Saxons. Also Cornwall, was a holdout. The Welsh were a holdout. Manx, I forget what they were called. This was a Celtic kingdom for a while that was different. There were Romano-Britons, particularly down here, as opposed to the Scotti and the Picts up here in Scotland, and there a lot in the lowlands. There's a lot of Celtics in the lowlands that were were Britons that fled north out from the Anglo-Saxon conquest. So yeah, so that's sort of some of the research that I've done and know that go back somehow enough distance, sure enough. Sapiens, Congress of Vienna. It was Metternich's baby. Yeah, but it's sort of British. Looking at it, I would say it's Metternich, Britain. It wasn't a British initiative gamer. It was a project of Metternich. Yeah, I know Metternich and all that stuff. But Belgium, I really would say, is a British puppet state for the longest time. Yes. Because you realize the Congress of Vienna is happening at the same time the Battle of Waterloo is happening. And because it was in progress at the time. And they're trying to develop, I'm just sort of shortening all this stuff, and I'm sure some of you know it better than I do, but we're trying to divide up post-Napoleonic, post-French Revolution Europe, because, you know, hey, the Illyrian coast officially went to France for a while under Napoleon, and other crazy things like that. Well, who's going to get this? Who's going to get that? Who's going to get this other thing? What's going to be the Bourbon kingdom down here, and what's going to be the Bourbon kingdom out here, and how? Because there's 3 Bourbon kingdoms. There's France, there's Spain, and then there's, you know, down here in Naples, Sicily. And what's going to be Habsburg? You know, what Habsburg territories in Italy get to stay, and what's going to be, you know, Tuscany, and, you know, they're dividing up all kinds of regions and dividing up, you know, because there's obviously what was of the Holy Roman Empire at the start of the French Revolution. And then you have the Napoleonic conquest, and he creates like the Confederation of the Rhine and some other sorts of things. And again, I don't remember all the details. And he sort of, some of the various puppet states, he of course takes Hanover away from the Elector of Hanover, which of course is the same person as George III of England. So the Hanover is not allowed to continue to be ruled, you know, during Napoleon's time by his enemy, the King of England, but they get Hanover back. They do during the Metternich conference, and it is only Queen Victoria, because all electors must be male. And so the main line to inherit Hanover is a woman. So it goes to some other Hanover relative, whoever becomes the next elector in Hanover. That's finally is when Hanover is finally broken off from England, because since 1714, since 1714, the Elector of Hanover had been the King of England, the first 3 Georges, and then onward after George IV and whatnot, until Victoria had been the Elector of Hanover. And so the Hanoverian army adopts red coats because it's the same as the English army. But they have their own officer corps, their own traditions. It is still a very Germanic, even though they wear the same... I mean, they're different. If you look at all the fashion and the way all these coats are cut and they change over the years, because I have studied this in the 18th century, well, starting in the 17th century, in detail, how the coats change from, you know, different cuts up until, you know, the Napoleonic eras. They change, but the facings or the turnbacks on the coats, generally for the regiment, generally speaking, stay the same color. So it's generally a red coat with either, you know, depending on the regiment, with yellow facings or blue facings or green facings or whatever. And Hanover adopts a similar sort of thing, but in the German cut and in the German style. And so the Hanoverian army is a different army than the English army, but whenever England goes to war, so does Hanover, and vice versa. So that until Queen Victoria. So yes, but I do believe, and again, I don't know all of the details. Yes, 1815 is, you know, the Waterloo and Congress of Vienna. Very much the English are dominating the situation out here. They are insisting that the House of Orange is going back into ruling the Netherlands. There was pro-House of Orange, there was anti-House of Orange within it, but they're insisting that that the House of Orange is going back to the Netherlands. They're insisting that I don't know the popular feelings of the people, the Flemings and the Wallonians. They don't really want to be dumped into, to my knowledge, into the Protestant North because they're Catholic down here. The British really don't want to see at least the even the Wallonian part, let alone the Flemish part, to go to strengthening France too much because it is sort of a growing industrial area. So they want it to be separate. They don't want it to be part of whatever Habsburg rulership. So they sort of create, or force the creation, find a German princeling to become the king. I don't know that these people were particularly loyal to the Habsburgs or to whoever, but Britain is really putting their foot down about this part. Now, Metternich, in dealing with, this part of the world, yeah, I think it's very much Metternich's show here, as far as I can tell. Resumed after the 100 Days in Waterloo. Absolutely. That's what I mean. It's going on during that time period. It's not a thing. I'm not saying that they're having the meetings at the exact same day, because I do know the 100 days and that throws everything into chaos. But meaning it's going. I'm trying to set the image for people watching Plastic Gangster as what is going on in the world. Let's see. I'm trying to read Fleming's. Quick Allied mobilization, likely because of the Congress of Vienna. Peoples of Belgium would not entertain a union with the Netherlands. They would have been happier as part of France. But yeah, Britain did not want it to go to France under any circumstances. Exactly. That's what I'm saying, is the people did not want to be ruled by heretics or whatever, however they, the Protestants, however they would describe them. And Britain did not want them to be part of France, to make France too strong. Because France, we do see, of course, a little bit of a hiccup during Napoleon III's reign in France, but we do see a growing Anglo-France alliance. And it starts growing because of the Bourbon claimants or kings flee to Britain during the French Revolutionary War era and continue there during the Napoleonic. And so Louis the whatever is enthroned in here. And when Napoleon comes back for the 100 Days, he flees back again to Britain. And so, to some degree, the Bourbon monarchy, French puppet would be overstating it, I would say, but they're definitely a British supporting the French traditional Bourbon monarchy, as opposed to the newer revolutionary Bonapartist monarchy, as opposed to the old Valois or whoever in the past. Long past. But they don't, so that is sort of a growing alliance. And with the consolidation eventually more and more of Germany and the Empire of Germany under the Hohenzollerns and, Bismarck and whatnot, Britain wants a counterbalance and weight to that. So when Prussia is sort of a militarized Protestant state, that's seen as a good thing by Britain and their allies. But once that's becoming too dominant, too strong, they're looking at getting other allies. Okay, we already lost Flanders to France, but I'm not sure just about that, especially when I look at the map and see many islands, even today, also walking across ice possible. Yeah, okay, see, this is an interesting thing here. As far as we can tell, all of these people, there were lots of people here, but even the people out here in, the Galapagos, the Easter Island, wherever Easter Island is, it's somewhere out here. I don't know if it's on this map or not. That's one thing I like talking. Pitcairn Island, I don't know, wherever Easter Island is out here. All of these people here all come from sort of over here. And it's an interesting phenomenon, because the dominant wind, my understanding, the trade winds, the dominant winds are from east to west. Now, why did the people migrate into the wind? My the current thought is that they would paddle and search for islands in their large canoes, their catamaran canoes, pretty damn large. And they could go out here and get out so far and not find anything, and then they could go back by the wind, because they did have very, very, very primitive sails. They couldn't tack into the wind. They didn't have any of those kinds of good things. So they chanced it, and people would keep trying, but they could more or less kind of think that if things went to hell, they very well might be able to get back to their islands. Oh, they actually did pretty good celestial navigation, it is thought. Meaning they can navigate by the stars at night, and most of the times pretty quickly you could get clear enough skies to see. So they sort of kind of have an idea of where they are. And this map, the Pacific is damn big, but this is actually a bit of an exaggeration for the Pacific, especially down here. And there is a little bit of thought that some of these people do sort of eventually touch on the American coast, but it is highly populated, highly warlike compared to finding. Now Hawaii, they fought all kinds of wars and amongst themselves. It was not a peaceful place before James Cook, the British explorer, shows up there first. But so there really is not a migration from the east to the west. It is really west to the east. And so these people get out here in very primitive conditions in what is basically Iron Age, or no, pre-Iron Age, Stone Age conditions, meaning they did not use metal tools, as far as I know, to get out to here. So I don't know that with either the trade and current winds come down here, the more we look at it, is very ancient, because it's sort of like the Portuguese discovered the Azores, but if you look at it, there is signs of Roman occupation, and then it gets lost, and then there's signs of but then everybody disappears. There isn't a population that they find, the Portuguese, when they show up here, and there is like a really, really like Stone Age or Neolithic type age human population out here in the Azores. So the humans get out here from some there. So somebody, whether it's they get blown off coast and just happen to make it here, and hey, we have a few women, and it wasn't all guys in the boat, so we start over again, because again the trade winds, they can't quite get home and whatnot. So whether it's by accident or by design of exploration and finding some of, I don't know if there's, Cape Verde definitely had old human occupation on it. So I don't know whether they came down here early on. We definitely know the Vikings make it up through to here. Now the Vikings are Iron Age people in essence, because they have the workings of iron. And, they get in here and set up, Nova Scotia and whatnot. They set up permanent habitation, multi-generational, that eventually gets cut off. So there's some faked, some clearly faked, and some maybe real, very ancient stones, carvings, very ancient, that may be tied to very, very ancient peoples. I don't want to equate them with what we think of modern day Europeans or Roman era Europeans, but that very well may have made it over here somehow at some sort of ice age type situation via boat, meaning that I don't think that they may cruise along an ice, a glacier front or whatever you want to call it, but there wasn't a land dry, it's too deep here, land dry human connection here. Here, depending on how you do it, I don't know, with the ice coming down. But yeah, boat. I think even here it's not thought that they walked, but that they sort of coasted along the ice front, as it were, hunting seals or other sort of animals, and they make it over here, and then they may come back and tell them, hey, we found good land way down here, so come get the girls, and let's the hunting party comes back, and let's get the girls and move into this nice new land we found down here, and move in. We can hypothesize the story, but I don't know if we'll ever know until we get proper time travel and go back and take a look and then fuck everything up. So yeah, I don't know whether it's an actual land bridge and walking, like I say. I think it might be just coasting along the ice, because we can see, whether we call them Eskimos or whatever, we can see people living along ice areas, dealing with walruses and seals and fish and whaling and whatever, that killing a few polar bears, and sort of, but moving via boat as much as anything else. Yeah, France was a client state. Yeah, they were walking outrigger canoes. Yes, Polynesians. Yes, the seas are rare and incremental. Madagascar was not settled until 500 AD, even if Homo sapiens were living across the strait from many thousands of years. Yeah, Easter Islanders couldn't move on after wrecking their island because they ran out of wood to build canoes. Absolutely right. Strong arm, or Star Streak. My understanding is yes, they ran out of big trees to make their way of communication. Verified remains of 70,000-year-old campfires in South America. People were there one way or another. Oh yes, and like I say, recently I've heard they've uncovered footprints in stone, that had been mud at the time, of a human that's 30,000 or whatever years old, that they figure. So yeah, humans were here long before, my understanding is, the genetic peoples of what we'll call the pre-Columbian peoples that dominated here before Columbus shows up. So they all come from somewhere here, as it's thought. We, of course, modern day Americans come from everywhere in the world, but the main settlers were coming early on, were coming from Europe. Whether it is Britain or France or Germany, even, and Spain, obviously down here, and Portugal over in Brazil. But yeah, so yeah, it's migrations of people along the islands, hopping. Yeah, means opinion. People were there before. Yeah, they were always. Yeah, there's people around. Okay, guys. Well, my throat's getting a bit rough. I've had fun hanging out with you guys. I'm going to message Eric today, but I don't know if we're going to be doing Hell Let Loose tomorrow. If I know Eric's going to be showing up, or we'll be doing War Thunder one way or another. So yeah, it was fun hanging out with you guys. So be back tomorrow. So thanks everybody. Have a very good day, evening.